The story starts with a fight between a girl wearing a sailor-type uniform and a boy in a green hoodie. The boy has a blue marking on his cheek, while the girl has a four-pointed star-like mark on her forehead. Both were breathing heavily. The girl commended the boy's skills, but he was looking more exhausted than the girl was. She now had the upper hand. The both of them were still talking when a sudden phone call interrupted them. The boy answered the call and all of a sudden his expression changed. Flashback to 3 months ago. It was the month of September, and the name of the boy wearing the green hoodie was Fuda Okya, a 14-year-old high schooler. He was walking to school with his friends named Daiki and Tetsu. While they were walking, he was told that there was a new student who was going to transfer to their school that day. All of them were wondering what kind of person he was, but by the time they arrived at school, the transfer student introduced herself as Kuko Ishigami. Yes, she was a girl. Everyone was taken by surprise to see that she was a girl, and also from seeing the large scar on her forehead and how she did not make any effort to hide them. Instead of a similar reaction that his classmates felt, our Fuda blushed upon seeing her. He thought that she was beautiful. He was simply stunned by her. Fuda introduced himself shyly when all of a sudden, the girl replied, "That's a dumb name." The boy was shocked upon hearing this. And what's even weird was there was this other guy who introduced himself as East and then dissipated into thin air. Shortly after, the new girl was already surrounded by their classmates, asking her things like where she came from and what her hobbies were, making an effort to get to know her. On the other hand, the Fuda was hooked on the man he just saw. It turns out that he could see ghosts, and his dad says that it's one of the gifts of youth. One time, he tried to deny it, but his dad casually asked to have his eyes. Thinking about that ghost, the Fuda was pulled into a dream, only to see the ghost, him, Kuko, and another girl. After that dream, Fuda kept thinking about her all throughout the day. He couldn't keep Kuko out of his head, thinking of her and what she could be doing. By the end of the day, when everyone was already heading home, Fuda saw Kuko with East, the ghost, who was waving at him. Kuko caught him staring at her. He waved and tried to strike up a conversation. He ended up fumbling, nervously introducing his friends one by one, telling her how good of people they were and that she didn't really need to join any club at all, but she should make friends. Seeing him like this made her laugh, and she said that he had convinced her. Shortly, the two said goodbye. "Goodbye for now," East said, to which the Fuda accidentally answered, "Yeah, sure." That was when Kyoko found out that he could see East. She walked up to him and removed the bandage from his cheeks. There she saw his mark and told him that he was her rival. She then smacked him across the face, making him fall over the flight of stairs. Another flashback of the two of them happened, where Fuda was telling her that the rituals were not real, and as if on cue her father called out for her, telling her that she will be the sacrifice for the next ritual. This chapter starts with the Fuda narrating this as an experience from another lifetime. He said how he had always been able to see spirits, but this ability was to be kept as a secret, especially from the priesthood, since they were the only ones to wield the ability to use magic, and they perform rituals to protect their people, and that if they learn about his ability, then he will be wiped from the face of the earth, since other than the priests, the other people who can use magic are evil demons. All of a sudden, a girl appeared out of nowhere. When Fuda saw her, she immediately ran away and picked a piece of wood, and with all her might, slapped him with it, believing that he was one of the evil demons that they had always heard in stories. Fuda tries to save himself by informing her that he is the son of the shoemaker. Ryu hears that the girl stops banging him with a stick since the shoemaker he just mentioned was a friend of his father. Fuda asked her what she was doing out in the forest, and the girl replied that she was picking up medicine for her mother and handed over a piece of paper. Upon seeing it, Fuda told her to wait. By the time Fuda came back, he already had berries in his hand. He told her that she should give it to her mom so she would get better. The girl was shocked to learn that Fuda could talk and see spirits even when he was not a priest. He asked her a favor to keep it as a secret. The girl agreed, but with one condition, and that was to see him again, which the Fuda shyly agreed. The girl then introduced herself as Rei. The next day, she came back, happily giving our Fuda a hug and thanking him because her mother had gotten well the next day. Not long after that, the two were already in love with each other, and in the span of those 2 years, both of them were happy together. But then, the year of performing a new ritual arrived, and Rei was chosen to be the next sacrifice, and though everyone thinks that this is an honor for her and her family, him, on the other hand, remained quiet, angry, and frustrated. After the news and being in the procession showing her off as the new sacrifice, Fuda and Rei had their last conversation. Fuda stated that he wanted to become a warrior because they were the only people who could protect others. He told her what the spirit said, that the ritual was useless. He suggested that they leave together to a place far away, but Ray just smiled at him and told him that he should send her off with a smile, that there are other people out there, and that he'll find someone else. The day of the ritual came, and the executionist introduced herself as Stona, the child of Self. Everyone was told to kneel, to give honor to the gods and their sacrifice, but Fuda remained standing, his expression darkened, and rapidly sprinted to the altar, only to see his lover's heart already ripped out of her chest. Using a knife tied with rope, he saw the executioner's face. It was a familiar face, but he didn't know where he had seen her before. Not long after that, Fuda woke up, only to find out that it was all just a dream. He was told that he was in the hospital after he fell from a flight of stairs. He then looked to his side, only to see her, the executioner, Stona, he said. Hearing this, the Kuka said good, called him a coward, and said that he still had to relive 7 more deaths. Fuda was shocked hearing those words come out of Kyoko's mouth. The air between them was thick, when all of a sudden, a girl came in, crying, looking for Fuda. It was Nano. She said that the hospital called her dad, and her dad called her and told her that the Fuda was rushed to the hospital, so she hurried here to visit him. Turns out Nano's grandfather owns the hospital he was in. As she was wiping away her tears, she told Fuda that they had already called his parents, and they said they would be on their way. Nano, who had no idea what had just happened between the two, held Kuko's hands tightly, thanking her for saving Fuda, and cried once more. Kyoko was left speechless seeing the girl thank her. Fuda, who was seeing this scene, thought to himself, "It's not like I'm dying, right?" Recalling what had just happened in his dreams. Finally realizing what had happened, Fuda hurriedly opened the sheet covering his legs, and there he saw it. His right leg was bandaged. Thankfully his leg was not broken, just a sprain. That's also what he told his friends. He told them that he thought it was broken too since it looked bad. Each one of his friends were suggesting ways to help him, but it gradually got worse. Hearing all these, Kyoko, who was sitting next to him, told him that his friends are so caring, and gave him a note saying roof after class. And so he did. After class, Fuda went to the roof, only to see Kuko standing on the tallest part of the building. Shocked, he asked her what she was doing. She answered that she likes heights. Fuda then replied that he could see up her skirt. Then she replied, "I hope you enjoy it. This will be your last memory." But when the wind blew, what he saw under her skirt was gym shorts. All of a sudden, Kyoko asked him to talk about his dream. Fuda told her that he saw things that felt real and familiar, and that was when he realized that all of those things were real and that they were Phone and Stona in their past lives. For a moment, the Fuda got confused, but East interrupted them, reminding him that his name was Fuda Okyup, which cleared his mind. Fuda asked where that dream was, but even Kyoko did not know. However, she delivered Ray's last words to him, which were, "I love you, Phone, I'll wear your shoes all the way to heaven." Relieved that she had fulfilled her promise to the girl, it was now time to perform her duties. Kyoko took out her spirit circle. She said that he needed to suffer the rest of their shared history so that she could end the cycle of reincarnation. She wants this to be the last time, the end of their eternal conflict. Frustrated, he insistently asked her why, because the truth was told. He just wanted to be friends with her. But Kuko brought up how she was the one who injured him yesterday. Fuda dropped his crutches and confidently said that he was the one who injured himself yesterday, and that he was just fine. Seeing the scene, Kuko recalled all the times that Fuda's friends thanked her for the help he gave him. He's pretty cool in his own way, East said. Kuko's expression softened, and she said that she had done what she had done here, so she'd just leave. By the time she left, the spirit of Phone said that she would never forgive her, and that she should suffer, but Fuda disregarded what he had just heard. At home, at their dinner table, Fuda asked his pregnant mother what she would do if the baby told her that she was a reincarnation of someone else. But instead of answering directly, she said that she thinks it would be nice if she sees her mother again. Shortly, Fuda was already on his bed, lying, thinking about which life it was that he lived with Kyoko, East, and the other girl named Rune, he said. And all of a sudden, a girl who looked like Nano popped out of nowhere. It was Rune. She told him that she has the thing that he left her. It was a spirit circle. "What's your deal again?" Fuda asked Rune. Hearing those words from her master, she was shocked and sad, since it was him who told her to wait for his call. And she had waited so long for his call that never came until now. She added that she should be the one asking her those questions. Still in a state of confusion, Fuda clarified his role to Rune, if he truly is her master, which she enthusiastically confirmed as true. From a distance they both heard the door open and close. The voice of Fuda's father can be heard from his room, informing him that the man has arrived. Shortly, he was already by his door, telling him to see the thing he got from the claw machine, asking him if he wanted to have it. Rune greeted him, which made Fuda panic a little, but it turns out that he cannot see her. Fuda refused his father's offer, so he just went and left his room. But after a few seconds, he came right back in, slamming the door open, calling his son's name, and told him that he senses a presence in his room. Learning that he can tell that there is a presence of someone made Rune happy, but Fuda on the other hand shooed him away. But before his father left, he said that if his ghost sight reveals another visitor, he should tell him. After the door was closed, Fuda heard his father telling his mom that their little boy was already asserting his rights. That was when he asked his father not to just barge in because he had the right to privacy. On the other hand, Rune redirected her attention to him, asking him where they were and what had been happening. Fuda explained to Rune that he was now Fuda Okya, but he was also Fortuna. But that was him in another life, and that is all that he could remember. Now, both of them have no idea what is going on. Even the spirit circle that Fortuna, the old man, left with Rune has no idea what he is going to use it for. Rune just said that it was her master who made it, but she, too, is clueless as to what it is for. Now he was just figuring out how to use it and noticed that even though it was similar to Kuko's, hers had more flames. Rune then asked if he had any duties to give her, but when he said no, she begged him not to send her away since she had nowhere else to go and asked to keep her by his side. Having no choice but to say no, he allowed her to stay with him. Rune then shed tears of relief. The next day, Rune came with Fuya to school. She was new to everything that he bombarded him with questions, excited to learn about the new place when all of a sudden, East and Kuko arrived. By the time Kuko laid eyes on Rune, she immediately burst into tears. Rune then came in for a hug, saying she also missed Kuko. Kuko looked at Fuya and told him that Rune is unlike other ghosts. She can also make physical contact, but he better not do anything appropriate to her. That was when he remembered how Rune bowled him last night. Shortly, they were already in their swimming class, and Rune was hyping up Kuko, who was wearing her bathing suit. His friends caught him looking at Kuko and looked at him teasingly. The boys huddled together and talked about how the girls looked. The class ended, and Fuya and Rune were already on their way home when Fuya asked Rune how the four of them met. Rune explained that Mr. East was his disciple and Kuko was his daughter. This made him wonder what kind of person he was in his past life. Out of nowhere, Kuko answered that they didn't like Fortuna that much because he used to say that everyone except him was a moron. And in an instant, Kuko's spirit circle was already out, pointing it towards him. Then she suddenly remembered what he did the other day, so she changed her mind, saying that the next one should wait a little longer until his legs are better. All of a sudden, Rune asked him if they don't get along well because she heard him say that he likes her waist, her legs, and her knockers. Kuko, who heard this, immediately slapped him hard and called him a perv, and offered Rune to stay with them if her master does something funny and left. A few moments later, Kuko and East left. Fuya got lost in his daydreams, wondering if he was not involved in this spirit circle thing. Then maybe Kuko and his friends could live a normal life. He got pulled out of his daydreams when Rune saw a ghost from a distance, which was bad news. Rune called for him, but then he started going feral, trying to attack them. Thankfully, Fuya pulled out his spirit circle, which hit the ghost, and he slowly dissipated. He then realized that it was truly a weapon to destroy souls. September came, and their next battle continued. October came before they knew it, and it was time for another trial. But before they started, the Fuya showed his magic circle. After he asked if a touch would do, then why does he not go to the past when he touches his? Seeing the spirit circle, Kuko asked him where he got it from. He told her that Fortuna had left it with Rune. Kuko told Fuya that to use the spirit circle, he has to focus and concentrate on their desire to see their past self and then touch their head or heart. It's not that easy to find your focus, but even when the Fuda heard how difficult it would be, he still confidently said that he'd do it himself and tell her all about it tomorrow. Kuko tried to confirm if he was really going to do it and not simply chickening out, but Fuya answered that maybe if they get to learn about their past lives on their own, then maybe they could sort out their eternal conflict and be on better terms with each other than the two left. Frustrated, Kyoyuko hissed, saying, "It's not that simple, Fortuna." But his father East reminded her that the boy was not Fortuna, his name was Fuya Okya, and he was a very nice young man. Back at home, Fuda was trying to focus and allow himself to see a vision of his past life, but Rune was singing, wearing a weird outfit, and dancing on his bed. Fuya asked her what she was singing, wearing, dancing, and cosplaying, but instead of answering him, she replied, "Maybe you have some subconscious resistance," and so Rune grabbed the spirit circle and smacked her master on the head. He was now dropping inside a hole as if traveling through time. Rune waved goodbye and told him that she'd see him soon. And just like that, he was now inside another version of himself, his past life where he was called Van. He and his comrades were riding a horse, and they were now near the witch's lair. But as if to lighten up the tension, a tall old man said, "Mere tavern tales, no doubt." But contrary to him, the other person who was with them told him to watch what he says, and that he should not mock the darkness of nature. Van was nervously walking, cautious, but still, he asked if he could lead the subjugation. Hearing this, the man who was leading the way asked Van if he would take responsibility, and immediately gave him permission to perform the subjugation. That there was his first duty, the tall man who was with them warned Van not to look into her eyes, or else he will feel sorry for her, and to consider her not any more human. But even so, Van asked if they do not give her any dignity, and if they really needed to betray their tenants just to capture her. However, even though he speaks out of goodness, but it was something he needed to know before going to his first battle. The other man called out to them, telling them that they had found it. It was the house of the witch. In this life, he is known as Van, a knight of the order, the guardian of all people. Today, he was assigned to dispatch the raven-haired witch, and he will perform his duty. As Van entered the room and met the eye of the witch, something in him urged him to kill her immediately. And that was what he did, piercing his sword through her heart. But before she lost her breath, she cursed the man, saying that he will forever bear the cursed mark. He succeeded in his mission with the witch's head in his hand. Injured and looking like he lost his life, he came out alive. With that one kill, he finally became a knight, but he was banished from his home because of the scar on his face. His father said that he brought dishonor to their family by being disfigured by the black arts. The future of their house was now given to his brother, and that was when his travels began. Van was banished from the Flanter house, his house, and the order because of the scar that the witch gave him. That was what he told the tall man who accompanied him to that subjugation. As a final token, the man gave him money, told him to spend it with care, and said it surely would last him years. He told Van that if he ever needed any help, he could call him any time. There, Van left the place where he had grown up and went to the sea. Van wandered for half a year before he settled in on a place by the sea. He spends his days fishing, hunting, training with his sword, and spending his money solely on drinking. But still, he goes out to town with his face all bandaged up. Even though he got the scar to protect the people, he still could not wear it with pride. The thought of the witch's face crossed his mind, and frustration and anger rushed through him, blaming all that was happening to him on the witch. Years later, he heard the news about his brother's succession after his father died. Walking in town, he overheard a father and his son talking about wanting to follow in his father's footsteps. Carrying a barrel of drink, a shady man called him, declaring that he, Van Flanter, was to die. The man attacked him, and the two clashed swords. The two were somehow on par with each other. A few moments later, panting, the man who attacked him praised him, saying that they did tell him that he was a knight, but that was a long time ago. Van also praised him for his backhanded skill in swordplay. He then attempted to buy himself out of this assassin, asking him how much his brother paid him to dispatch him and he would pay more, persuading him to join him and he would no longer want the coin. But if he refused, then they would fight their way out against each other. Hearing this rare invitation, the sellsword took him up on his offer and introduced himself as Still. After a few drinks with Still, he found out that it was truly his brother who wanted to kill him since he saw him, the eldest son, as a threat to his standing in their family, even though he was already disowned. After sending Still, his brother sent a few more assassins to dispose of him, and again, the two of them beat them back. They did the same things he did when he was alone, drinking, eating fish and rabbit, and honing his sword skills, except this time, he had company. One day, the two of them ran out of drinks, so they went to town to get some. On their way, there was a public sermon by a priest, telling the people not to be fooled by the lies of the church. Hearing what the priest just said in his public sermon, the both of them feared for his life. If the church hears about it, he will be hanged for sure. Shortly, the two of them heard a ruckus. The priest ran away and bumped into a boy. The two intently looked into each other's eyes, and the priest proceeded to run away. The people who were chasing him arrived at where the two were, but the boy directed those people in the wrong direction. They had just witnessed an admirable scheme. Later that day, the same priest went to their home with the kid from last time and asked if they could stay with them, but they refused. Desperate, the priest offered them money, saying he could pay, and as a former knight, it was also hard for Van not to help a person in need. The priest introduced himself as Glass, an unordained priest. Confused, Van asked why he was unordained but had the holy text with him. Without second thoughts, Glass said he stole it. Hearing this from him, Van changed his mind and Still laughed at him, calling him an idiot. Desperate to send him away, Van said that they don't have any food for a priest like him, that they only have fish and beasts. However, despite everything that they said just to send him away, the priest named Glass stayed at their home for a day, which then turned into months and then years. Now, the three of them, except Chilo, still sit around and drink their wine, talking about life's misfortunes and faith. It has been long since his brother sent assassins to kill him. A few years passed, and their life continued that way until Still died in a drunken brawl, and their home grew a little quieter. Then Glass died from drowning in a well, while Chilo left after his master died, returning to wherever they came from. After years, he was alone again. But one day, Van saw a baby outside his door. Seeing this baby outside his home in winter, he immediately changed his clothes and carried the baby to the church, a safe place where the kid should be left, not his home. By the time he arrived at the church, the priest simply told him to look after his guest's welfare, and if he does not want its company, then just send it away. But since the guest is a baby, he had no choice but to raise it, since the church will not take care of the baby. After giving out Fuda a piece of bread, the priest sent him away. Now it's just him and the baby. At that moment he decided to take care of the kid and would make her work to repay for it as soon as she is able to do so. When the child smiled at him, a name suddenly popped in his head. Ray, he said, which made it giggle. The kid seemed to like the name that Van had said, so he decided to make it the name of the child. On their way home, he couldn't stop crying. The time he had Ray with him, he started working at a farm. He begged the farm woman to teach him how to raise a child and goat milk in exchange for his services at the farm. Sometimes, the lady would show random acts of kindness and give him stuff for the baby, but the greatest struggle he had was making Ray sleep through the night. Somehow, he got used to it. 3 years passed, which became 5, and then one day, Ray asked him where her mother was, and he kept lying, lie after lie, telling her stories of how he and her mother met, even stories of Still, Glass, and Chelo. Being with Ray, he had stopped drinking wine, and his greatest comfort became Ray's smile. Before, his only role was to serve and protect and become a strong knight. Years passed by, and the girl had grown into a wonderful young woman. Now his daughter was his everything. He wanted to spoil her and shower her with love, so much so that he even sold his sword to buy the kid a dress. He has also gotten old, and he would someday leave Ray alone, and so he decided that he was going to find Ray a husband. The two of them went to say goodbye to the farm woman who had helped them, telling them the reason for their journey, and Ray, of her own free will, joined her father. While the two of them are walking, Ray mentions her dream to her father. It was their past lives as Phone and Ray, though they could not remember that. Something in their hearts remembered. Ray said that this boy made her the finest pair of sandals, which made her want to walk and walk forever, and there she saw another boy who was lonely, and that it was the God who sent her and told her to bring comfort to that man. Hearing these words from his daughter made him cry, to think that even when he had raised her through lies, she still grew up as a wonderful woman. Van decided to visit his old home, the household of the Flanter, but it was not there anymore. It was said that the master of that house had gone mad and set the place on fire himself. The two then continued their journey. They were heading to an old friend's home. It was Chilo. Dan wants to leave Ray to Chilo. He has known him since he was a child, and he knows that the boy is a good man. But when Ray asks if he is handsome, Van answers, he's a good man. When the two of them were close to reaching Chilo's place, Van suddenly lost his footing, making his head hit a rock. And before he knew it, he bled to death, without even seeing her daughter get wed. The last words he said was, "I love you." After delving deep into his past self as Van, this chapter starts with the Fuya waking up, feeling like he had dreamt the same dream over and over again for a very long time. On his way to school, his friends greeted him. This time he recognized them as people from his past life as Van, realizing that Kuko is not the only person that she had met before, and these friends are his friends for a long time. Fuya silently sat down at his desk wondering who he is right now after being two of his past selves. An enthusiastic greeting from Rune pulled him back to reality. Kuko immediately asked her what he saw in that past life after killing the woman who defended the village from the plague. But it was contrary to what the church said, accusing her of being a witch. Both of them didn't know both sides of the story. After class, both Kuko and Fuya left early and did not attend their clubs. Learning how both of them were not able to make it, the group grew suspicious. Outside the campus, the four of them are now walking together, and as usual, East and Rune are talking about random stuff again while the other two discuss serious matters. Kuko asked what happened to the villagers that she was helping, but the fact is he did not know, so that's what he said. He told her the truth, everything that happened after he killed the witch, how he got disowned by his family and the order, how he wandered on his own and spent his days drinking, how he met new friends who were the past lives of Daiki, Tetsu, and Mr. Izuma, where the former two died because of the alcohol. He also told her how he took in an orphan baby who was a reincarnation of Rei, making Van's life a significant one. And when he died, Rei held him in her arms. He did not suffer through this lifetime. Hearing this, Kuko kicked him in the face, which shocked everyone, especially Fuya. Rune told her off, saying that Fuya was fragile. Kuko glared at Fuya. Fuya yelled at Kuko and told her that he was not them. Out of anger, Kuko screamed, telling him that he was all of them, Phone, Van and Fortuna, blaming him for all the mistakes that all his past selves had made. Frustrated and angry, he asked her the same thing she accused him of, all the things her past self had done and the thing that she did to Rei, confident that she did nothing wrong. Kuko explained how it was the people who wanted a sacrifice, and that they became agents of death so that people could live in peace. They honor the family of the sacrifice, and it was seen as a sacred ritual. They made sure that it would not turn into something where they mindlessly kill people. She said they asserted control over the ritual to avoid people killing blindly, which led to wars. Unconvinced, Fuya retaliated by saying, "Then you could have just ended it. Show them the truth." But Kuko reasoned out how the last priest who did that was burned to death by the very same people who wanted to end the ritual. The ritual was performed to quell people's lust for blood, and he knew nothing about it. Fuya then revealed to her that he knew enough because he saw the spirits, and that's what he told them. Upon hearing this, there was a moment of silence between the two. It was like this had shed light on Kuko. Rune held Fuda's shoulders, telling him to calm down. On the other hand, Kuko was still thinking because Stona, too, could see spirits, and that was mainly the reason why she was allowed to view old records, which was because of her ability to see those types of things. Curious, Fuda asked what happened to Stona after he died, so she told him everything. From there, the people banded together and killed every single one of the priests, and unlike the priests who made the death painless, theirs were torture, laughing at them while they butchered them and offered the blood of the dead priests to the people's hero, Phone. Kuko left with that statement. After Kuko told him everything that happened after Phone died, the very same night he caught a fever. Even though they went to see the doctor, they couldn't see anything specifically wrong with him, so he was told to rest, which is what he did for the last 2 days. Every time he closes his eyes, he will always get nightmares, so vividly, considering the fact that none of his past selves were there. Fuda woke up at around lunch from the nightmare that he just dreamt about. Rune came close to him, checking his temperature using her forehead and informed him that his fever had not yet come down. The action took him by surprise, making him crawl back into his bed. Every time he closes her eyes, she sees them. The next time Fuda woke up, he saw Daiki and Tetsu playing a game while they were visiting him. The two greeted him, telling him that they had just started playing the game. They also told him about what day Yumi and the others were. They even asked if he could finally go to school the next day, which the Fuda answered with a he was not sure yet. His friends left, and the next time he woke up, there he saw Steel, Glass, and Chilo. From a distance someone was calling for Fuda. He couldn't figure out who that was, but later recovered. He ate with his mom but was having visions of his old comrades, Steel, Glass, and Chilo. After Daiki and Tetsu's visit, Fuda stopped having nightmares. The next day Rune was once again wearing a weird outfit. This made him ask Rune about how much she knew about his other lives, but just said that everything was imprinted inside his subconsciousness, and that she could feel the signals coming from his head, but if he focuses on hiding it then nothing will come out. The next day, all his other friends came to visit. Just right after, he had a dream about Rei and 2 children who looked exactly like Yumi and Nano. By the time he woke up, he saw Yumi and Nano by his side. They asked him if something happened between him and Kuko. They were worried, especially Nano, but he brushed off the topic by saying they were just having small talks. Fuda asked Rune why he always had to meet the same people over and over again. Rune said that bonds endure, we meet and part and meet again. Fuda listened to her as he drifted to sleep. Fuda had a dream about Fortuna, where a man named Specifica came to him and asked him to give him the spirit circle. He felt how Fortuna found what the man said funny when a smirk crept across his face, and he drifted once more. Fuda was woken by Kuko's laughter while talking to Rune. She immediately noticed that Fuda was awake, smacked him across the face, and stood on top of his bed, where he immediately pulled the sheets underneath it, making Kuko fall, revealing her undies. West and Rune teased how Fuda saw everything underneath, and that made her cry. Fuda and Kuko are now sitting across from each other. Fuda is still apologizing about what had happened earlier, still prostrating in front of Kuko, who seems to feel a lot more awkward at what he's doing. Her eyes were still shooting daggers at him. Kuko clarified that she was really telling the truth about Phone and Stona's village. Fuda asked what she was doing here, now assuming that she was out to kill him while he was sick and weak, which she denied, even though she wanted to kill him. Today was not the day. Fuda invited her to play a game with him, telling her that she could kill him as much as she wanted in virtual reality. Kuko took up his invitation since she still had some time until her daddy picked her up. Fuda repeated the word daddy, which Kuko took negatively. The two played over and over, but she could not win against Fuda. She was raging. Out of the blue, in the middle of their game, Kuko asked Fuda if he gets along well with his family, and he said they did. After losing her last game, her daddy called her, saying he was going to pick her up. Hearing this, Fuda offered to walk her out. By the time they walked out of the building, Fuda was surprised to see that Kuko's father was his officer. He thanked Fuda for letting her come play. The two said their goodbyes. By the time he got back home, he checked his circle. He noticed that Kuko's circle had a new flame. His had one too. This takes his thoughts back to that dream with Spacifica. Rune has no idea who he is too. A series of questions popped into his head about Fortuna and what he did to make Kuko hate them, among other things. He needs to learn about Fortuna to understand everything. And with that, Fuda decides to leap into his other life. He wants to live through Fortuna's life. He fell through the circle and saw Fortuna, but he said, not yet. When Fuda said that he just wanted to know about Spacifica, Fortuna smirked and said, you should know that one. From one moment to another, Fuda was now in a wooden boat. In this life, he is called Floors, and he supervises the venture to meet the contractors. His servant called out for him, telling him to carry himself with conduct, regally, just like the young mistress on board and his servant. They had already arrived on land, and there they met Alvol and his daughter Roka, a seer. This is the fourth life. This chapter starts with Floors as an old man. He was beside a young child who was calling him Father Sphinx. He clarified that his name is Floors, telling the kid that his memory is already bad so they shouldn't change his name, even though that's what everyone calls him. The kid seemed to be listening to the story of Floors' venture and about Alvol. During that time, Floors' father was sick and he had to fill in for his father's work. His servant had introduced him as capable, which he negated honestly. However, despite that, Alvol liked him. He called Halara to guide them. In old Flora's story, Roka was a fortune teller who was there to meet the young lady of a noble house who sailed with them named Lihanera and her servant Curtinos, who was always with her, saying they were like brothers and sisters. But with Roka, he said, he felt like they were measuring each other with a glance. They were hired to a faraway land to build a sphinx. However, what they said was just to build something sphinxy in 3 years' time. Alvol for him was not just a wealthy man, but also a scholar in his own way. Then one day he summoned both him and Curtinos and told them that his daughter said that they were friends even before they were born. At that moment, he witnessed how a slave raised a glass with a noble. After sharing a glass with Alvola and Curtinos, on his way home, he met Roka. She started telling him ridiculous things, how she was the one who put the mark on his face, and proposed that they should end their cycle of death and rebirth, and eternal conflict to avoid further bloodshed. But Floors disregarded the idea, even though he could feel the same hatred she feels towards him. The next day, while they were at the construction site, Lihanera came to visit him, telling them that they would be leaving that day since their business at the place was done. Floors bid farewell to Curtinos, and just when the two left, Halara came running, telling him to go to Roka immediately. Even though he was busy, he still hurriedly went to where she was. There, he found Roka sitting comfortably, drinking wine. She started talking about his life and how his parents constantly fought with each other because of the scar on his face. Roka was insistent on wanting to end their cycle of hatred and that they should take this as an opportunity to break the cycle since they met without a blade between them. But Floors could not understand what she was saying. He stood up, thinking he still had a lot of this to do. But Roka said that their problem was of greater importance. Roka was insistent. She then said, "Search, remember, all of this is your doing," and that it was his responsibility to resolve their issue, and he had no choice but to act upon it. When Floors came back to their place, all the boys asked how his time was with Alvol's daughter, but to break their bubble, he told them how she only dragged him there to make him listen to some crazy vision of their past lives and how it was his fault for killing her first. The next day, Floors and his team were building his scaffolding when all of a sudden, Halara came running once more, telling him that Roka wanted him to go to her. Hearing all this, his comrades told him that he should just humor her since she's the employer's daughter. He then went with Halara to see Roka. He told her that he still had a job to take care of and that he did not just sail here to spend his time listening to her. But instead of listening to him, she threatened him by not giving him his pay and leaving him with no coin. Remembering all this makes old Flora's blood boil still, but even though she was like that towards him, her people seemed to love her deeply. This time, she told him about his past lives, who killed who and how there was a time when he was Van, and he killed Roka, who was a healer as ordered by his superiors. Next was Roka, a priestess, and she killed him for disturbing the ritual, trying to save his lover from becoming a human sacrifice. And still, it was his fault. The two of them are destined to cause each other suffering, but they should both prevent it from occurring again. Though somehow clueless if any of those stories were real, Flores still felt a rush of excitement. The tales of these two were fancy and enticing. She also told him about a time when both of them were a family, but it seemed like his experiment, or his ambition, and the Flores of that time caused a terrible accident that made Roka hate him forever. Though he doesn't know what happened, only that it killed many people. She doesn't know what it was, but it was them. As Fortuna and Coco, their story started all the hatred, and Roka said it was his fault. He started it all. Flores went back to work after wasting time listening to all the seers' stories. This became his routine. From days, which turned into months, then years. Roka would still call upon him, demanding him to come up with a solution. But he would think of other things, especially his Sphinx project, because Alval had requested them to sculpt a human-like face on the building. The kid he was telling this story to asked him why Roka could not just come up with a solution on her own since she's a seer. But he answered the same thing Roka had told him, that she could not do that since her sight of herself is clouded with her own anger and emotions, then she cannot discern images, and her visions of him whom she only feels hatred for is a very different matter as well. On the other hand, Alval's request of sculpting a face on a sphinx is a symbol that knowledge is not the domain of a wise man but a road to become one. And finally, after 4 years, Flores and his team has finished making the Sphinx. They went ahead and showed it to everyone. Seeing their work, Alval seemed to agree that it does not look like any man they knew, but it somehow looked familiar. A cat, said Roka. Hearing this, everyone suddenly burst out into laughter. That very night, everyone came to see the monument and celebrated its unveiling. Everyone, no matter their taste, is mystically moved into laughter at the sight of it. That same night, Roka went up to Flores, complimenting him on his work, and that was how his story went. For the last time, he was called to Roka's room. Tomorrow, he will be leaving, and both are thankful that they managed not to kill each other despite their great hatred. Flores left the next day, and Roka came to see him off, praying as he departed. When he arrived, he learned that his father had passed away half a year ago. In his grief, he blamed Roka for it. At that same time, people also started calling him Sphinx, which felt like mockery to him. Then, that was where Lihanera found him. Lihanera and Flores got married, and it seemed like her father was impressed with him that he wanted to marry his daughter. Lihanera, too, did not oppose this marriage, so there was no problem. After the two got married, Curtinos sold off some things that Alval gave him, with a letter attached that the treasures were his to sell, and it was more than enough to buy his freedom. For days right after their wedding, Lihanera cried her heart out because of Curtinos leaving. He could not say that there was no drama with him and Lihanera, but it had nothing to do with him. That was the last time they spoke of him, but even so, the two of them rarely ever talked. Everyone still calls him Master Sphinx, and he would scowl at hearing this. People categorized him as a tortured genius because of that. The man usually spends his time looking at the faraway sea, somehow longing to see the people beyond it, knowing that they could never meet again. Shortly after that, Lihanera gave birth to their first son, but he remained the same, as if lifeless. One time, Lihanera asked him to be a little warmer to their son, but that just made things more awkward. A few years passed, their son grew up, and they grew older. Lihanera was struck with a disease, and she grew weaker each day. One day, it was time for her to go. On her deathbed, Lihanera told Flores to accept the commission to make the library because she knew how much he hated the nickname Sphinx. Maybe by the time he made the library, they'd call him Mr. Librarian instead of the Sphinx. Lihanera told Flores that she was sorry that he was stuck with her instead of that girl from across the sea, Halara. Lihanera thought that Flores was in love with the girl, and that misunderstanding was never cleared up. But before she left the earth, the last name she called was Curtinos. Lihanera died, but Flores did not even shed a tear for her. His son took this harshly, asking him if he even had a heart. But Flores was just there, drinking. Even when his son told him that he would be leaving, he remained unwavering. Time passed, and he took the contract to make the library just as Lihanera wanted him to, but his nickname was never changed. They still called him Mr. Sphinx. The library was just as good as everyone expected it to be and showered him with praises, but somehow, he still found himself thinking, longing for the people from across the sea and what they would think. Flores informed everyone that the library would be his last work, and with his son gone, his students would succeed him. One day as Flores was sat at his usual spot, a man called out for him. It was Curtinos. He was now old and gray. He's still alive. Curtinos then asked about Lihanera, but Flores broke it into him that Lihanera was not with them anymore. Flores took Curtinos to Lihanera's grave and told her that she died of disease not long ago. Shortly after their visit, the two of them bid their farewell, and Curtinos said, "See you in another life." That was the first time Flores laughed so hard in a very, very long time. Once again, he visited Lihanera's grave, crying his heart out, realizing that Lihanera was the only person who loved him as he was, the only person to call him by his name. He begged to see her in another life and promised to treat her with love and care. In this life, Flores died alone, with regrets, in his own home. Fuda woke up after delving deep into his past life, with Rune wiping the tears off of his face as she said, "Welcome back home, Master Fuda." But it seemed like Fuda brought Flores home with him. Fuda went to school in this state, where he met his friends Daiki and the other guys. Everyone was concerned with how Fuda was acting. He was acting like an old man, and his friends were asking him if his brain was not fried by the fever that he had some time ago. Yumi caught him staring intently at him. Fuda remembered how Yumi was his wife in that third life. Kuko saw all of this. She said to herself, "You did it this time." Moron, according to her, he had exhausted his psyche too much, and that was why he and his past self was now blended together. Rune was also worried about him, but Kuko assured him that he's gonna be okay soon. Fuda said she could have told him something about it, but Kuko replied that she didn't really care about what happened to him. When the class ended, the two of them were now walking, doing their usual, sharing the information they had gathered from their past selves. During the whole walk, Fuda acted like an old man, which freaked the hell out of them all. Fuda told Kuko everything that happened in Flores' life, and she told him what happened to Roka, too, after he left. She said that everyone in that village was executed because the king opposed what he wanted. Since Alval wanted everyone to share the enlightenment of knowledge, everyone in that village got executed. On their way home, Fuda took a quick detour where he bought clay. By the time they got home, he started making a sphinx, crying and choking on his own tears, frustrated at what that life of Flores had become. The next day, his father woke him up only to see the masterpiece he had made. He said, "I bet you'll make awesome action figures someday." That was when Fuda realized that his father, in this life, was the very man who took him in when he was younger, the person he did not get to see before he died. At school, Fuda and Kuko were talking to each other. She noticed how he was back to his normal self now. He told her that life is the same. They all get to see the good and bad things in life, but they just try to live again. Maybe she'll get to see Ray again in his next life. As if on cue, Mr. Izuma called him over, telling him how he had accidentally put the name Flores on his paper. For a few moments, Fuda forgot what his name was, calling it having a brain fart, when in reality, he just didn't know who it was that he should be at that time. East, Rune, and Kuko, who heard this, were concerned. This chapter starts with Coco and Fortuna. Coco was kneeling on the ground while Fortuna stood tall. She was saying that she was late, asking Fortuna how he could do this to them. Turns out it was just a dream. At their table, the family gathered to eat. His father was teasing him about Fuda going out to get wasted. His mother then joined in the tease. This made him choke on his food. Fuda clarified that he was just going out for a group study with his friends. His father recommended him to read a manga, telling him he can learn everything from a manga. Fuda recalled his past lives. He started wondering if he had met his mother too, or if the baby inside his mom, for a moment, his past self, Van, overlapped with him while he drank water, saying that it was wine. While he was on his way to school, Fuda kept shaking his head as if it could help him keep his past selves' lives from overlapping on his own. At school, everyone gathered to study. Fuda could not understand their topic, and everyone was discussing their topic. Kuko asked if they always liked this, and Yumi confirmed that they always liked this. Out of the blue, Tetsu asked if Kuko and Fuda were going out. Kuko's face darkened, and she broke the pen she was holding, asking him if that gave him a hint. On the other hand, Fuda was already in the bathroom, telling himself he was himself and the others were his past. They were not him. By the time he got out of the bathroom, he saw East, and East told him that he recommended using his palm rather than a mirror. All of a sudden, East started bowing to him, apologizing for what Kuko had done to him, and that if it weren't for him, then she wouldn't have discovered him. But Fuda assured him that she still would have found out sooner or later because of his scar. Fuda asks East if Fortuna did something wrong to him, but East says that the only thing that Fortuna did was try to save him, and adds that he and Fortuna are different people and that he should not burden himself with his past because it would only cause confusion. East told him that if he continued to learn about his past self, he might lose this one. Just like with Kuko, she thinks this life is a continuation of her past life as Coco, which was also the reason why East kept following him before. When Fuda learned about this, instead of agreeing with East, he declined. Now he wants to help Kuko. Fuda declared that next time he will not be taken by any of his past selves. Upon hearing this, East was moved to tears, saying that he now believes him. Fuda jokingly said that maybe next time they could just look back to everything that had happened and then maybe he and Kuko could just date. East then dissipated into thin air, revealing Kuko who was behind him. She heard everything he said. As she walked past him, she smacked him in the face, her face blushing. On his way home, he could feel Phone's hatred leaning against him. It was a good thing the thing East told him was working, and Rune was there to remind him to buy milk. At the store, he and Kuko saw each other and bought milk together. Before the two of them went on their way, Fuda asked Kuko if she ever got confused. She said no, and if she ever saw the other people as their past selves. She said no, too. She said that Fuda was special since he had been with her from the start. Rune repeated what she said, saying that Fuda was special to her. Hearing this from Rune made her blush. Kuko yelled that was not what she meant and spirited away. And similar to Kuko, she too holds a special place in her heart, but he couldn't tell whose feelings they are. After the midterms examination, Fuda was ready to jump into another venture to learn his past self. In another life, Fuda wakes up bruised and bleeding. In this life, he is known as Houtaro. Houtaru was caught and tied up by bandits. They could hear them talking about wanting to get a ransom out of him. That was when he realized that he had been set up. The bandits said that Lord Furin will pay a big ransom for him. Shortly, a shadow of a man appeared, cutting off the heads of the bandits who were holding him captive, all in one swift. It was all over before he knew it. The assassin called him by his name, Hotaru Kajima, and removed the restraints on him. The ninja then introduced himself as Jinkuru, the ninja they hired to protect him. As if not interested, Houtaru only gave thanks to the man. Jinkuru, who was expecting him to ask certain things, was shocked, asking him if that was it. Houtaru broke it to him that he kinda already knew who hired a ninja to protect him. Jinkuru, on the other hand, asked him if he could tell him because he didn't know them at all, and now Houtaru was the one who was shocked. Houtaru brought Jinkuru home with him, offering him hot water and telling him to make himself at home. Shorty, a voice emerged out of nowhere, screaming out his name, and there she was, the princess, rushing in to hug Houtaru, thankful that he was safe because if he were to be gone, then she said she would be alone, since Houtaru was her one and only real family. Jinkuru, on the other hand, was shocked to hear that her calling the man her brother, for formalities he said reported that he had brought Houtaru back safe. Not long after this heartwarming scene, a man named Kaijima came, riding a horse, calling out to the princess. Seeing how Houtaru was still alive, a hint of annoyance crossed his face. He called Jinkuru, as if to thank him for saving Houtaru, but then discreetly handed a gold to him telling him to be gone. However, the man declined his offer. By the time the two left, Houtaru revealed to Jinkuru their situation, how he was the son of a mistress and the two of them were the legitimate children, and that he was the firstborn son but not the right one to receive a right in the royal succession. All that he has now was passed down from his mother and from him working as an apprentice of a smith inside the palace. The two then shared drinks, while both of them shared stories to each other about their lives and some other interesting things. Houtaru just met Jinkuru, but he seemed to be getting along with him. The two of them talked the night away. Not long after Houtaru slept, Jinkuru woke him up, telling him there were two people sent to kill him. He gave Houtaru a sword, and the two of them fought those people off. It was as if they could read each other's minds. Could Van and Steele's life echo through them? The next day, a man came knocking at Houtaru's home. By the time he came out, the man who called himself Reita Obayashi. He declared that he was there to claim the head of Houtaru Kajima. Seeing how Houtaru was unarmed, the man gave him a sword. The man then suddenly charged at him, screaming at Houtaru to prepare himself. Right on time, Houtaru parried the man's blow, but it was still a little early for him to be fighting for his life. It was barely noon. When the man once again tried to charge, he was hit by a fairly large wood on his head. It turns out it was Jinkuru. The two tied the man up and asked him a few questions. Turns out he is a Furin retainer and a warrior, another man deceived by Kajiru. Shortly, the princess came. Seeing a man tied up, she already got the gist of everything. Not long after that, Reita Obayashi became Houtaru's sword instructor, just as the princess told him to do. He obviously wasn't the brightest man, but he was a good warrior, especially with his sword. Now, Jinkuru was talking with the princess, and even Reita could tell that they liked each other. But just as Reita said, she was the princess, and she had to marry someone of the same stature as her. And so the days went. The two trained under Reita Obayashi, swinging wooden swords in the morning and real ones at night. Though at the back of his mind, Haotoru just wants to live a peaceful life and wants none of what his brother wants. He just wants to see his sister, the princess, smile, and he would do anything just for that. At the palace, a woman was sent by the shogun. It was as if Kajuru mocked her for being a woman, saying that he was just concerned about her general temperament. But the woman retaliated by saying perhaps Lord Jinkuru was in a bad temperament and asked if there was really no one else more suitable to become an heir, perhaps an older sibling. Hearing this hit a nerve on Kajuru, and he crazily screamed, commanding his men to kill the emissary sent by the shogun. That was what Reita said, but Kajuru couldn't do that because the woman jumped towards him and held him hostage as she led him to the gates requesting for a horse for her and her subordinates. She then kicked Kajuru to the ground. She said that their castle would burn, and he would have lit the torch. Everything was his fault. Hearing all this mess, Haotoru decided that he'd want his sister to go with Jinkuru. He asked him to take her with him and elope with her, but when he asked Jinkuru what else he could help them with, Jinkuru asked him to come with them. That night, he had decided that he would die for his sister, and he had a feeling that he just might die tonight. The Tokugawa clan now marches towards the Furin. Haotoru and Jinkuru are aiming to take the princess with them. They are looking for the spot where the princess slips through when she goes out. A sudden snap of twigs caught their attention. From a distance they could see three figures. It was the princess, a woman, and Sir Obayashi, who was shocked as the princess said, "I told you they'd come." The woman named Matsu was the princess nurse who told them to take her away with them, and she will stay because she's already old and would only slow them down. Hearing this, Haotoru still tried to convince her, but the princess pulled him and told him they had said their goodbyes. He noticed how her eyes were red, a sign that she had been crying. Jinkuru now looked at the princess asking her if she could spirit her away so they could live together, which she gladly accepted. The nurse once again bid them farewell, wishing for their safety. As they walked away from her, Princess Rahama asked Haotoru if he remembers her, because she was also his caretaker. She was one of the few people who knew about his existence inside the palace. From a distance, the four of them saw the palace getting burned. The memory of Haotoru's past life as Van came across him for a split second. It was the same way Kajuru ended his life in that life was how he also ended his life in this. Haotoru woke up from an extreme nightmare of his past life. It was the same. His brother, as a planter, would not give up his house to him even though he does not seek to make it his. He stood up and walked to find Jinkuru still keeping watch for them. While they continued their journey, Jinkuru told him that he had a weird dream about the princess and him, that they were together on a voyage to see a famous oracle. And that oracle told her that he and the princess were going to end up together. And when that happened, he left that princess with him. He knew that he was good to her. But hearing all of those words come out of Jinkuru's mouth gave him a flow of regret. From a distance, they heard the sound of horses, and then all of a sudden, an arrow hit Mr. Obayashi as he tried to protect the princess. And all the others. They heard the woman who was following them yell that they need to take the princess unharmed. Haotoru and Mr. Obayashi then stanced themselves into an offensive position and told Jinkuru to take the princess with him while they try to stop the people who were following them. Rahama tried to oppose his brother, telling him that they won't go without him. But Haotoru has made up his mind he will protect his sister. Jinkuru pulled her forcibly as they narrowly tried to get away. Obayashi's screams scared the horses, and then they took this opportunity to attack the enemies. The woman riding the horse suddenly took a gun out, pointing it at Obayashi, and then Haotoru charged at him, making her fall off her horse. The two of them fell off the river. The two of them fought, slicing each other off. The rain fell heavier, and they slowly were nearing the end of their lives. As the two of them fought, ghosts of the forest suddenly started popping out of nowhere, warning the both of them about a danger. Haotoru woke up all bandaged up, barely alive. An old man saved them. At his side he saw his enemy also patched up. As well, still alive, calling him stubborn, the old man told them that they owe Akari thanks, because it was her who found them. Time passed and the two of them were now able to sit and feed themselves. Well, Haotoru can. The other girl said that she's just not used to using her right hand. The two fought, screaming at each other. Akari, who saw this scene, cried, telling them to please stop fighting. Seeing the girl cry, the both of them stopped, saying that they were just kidding. The priest sat and told them they should just be friends because, from the story he had heard from them, he understood that the two of them, just by chance, fought for different sides and that the price of blood that they had paid was already enough to pay for that. Die and be reborn again, just like Buddha's teaching. The head priest told them that Akari lost both her parents to war, so he suggested that the two of them should just date and be her new parents since they could not go back to their own jobs. It was the suggestion he gave, then left them to it. But the two quickly agreed that it wasn't meant to be for them to end up together. However, the feeling the two had was different. They felt like they have now come in terms with each other. Then one day, they heard the news about the Furin getting all wiped out and how the princess died along with her pursuers. That night he decided to go to their meeting place, which was in the next town. But Iwana caught him. She said she wanted to go with him. He wanted to know what happened to them. At the next, they couldn't find Jinkuru or the princess, but on the bark of a tree, they saw a mark similar to Haotoru's scar. He knew it. Jinkuru would protect his sister, and they survived to the world. They may be dead, but to the both of them, it was a new life. All of them were truly reborn. Iwana asked him if they should keep looking for them, both panting. However, knowing that Jinkuru and her sister were alive, he took the heaviness out of his chest. Both tired, the two of them decided to take a little bit of rest. Iwana said that she wanna go back to adopt Akari, and Haotoru thought that he should do that too to repay them. Then, all of a sudden, Fuda woke up from reliving his past. He was confused because the two of them were just talking. But it turned out the two of them passed away while talking about their plans for the future. Rune greeted Fuda a good morning, and he did the same. She noticed how he had a different air about him, a little more calm. Fuda thinks that it must have been Haotoru's effect on him. He was close to Phone's age, but the two were so different since the two of them had very different experiences. Haotoru opened his spirit circle. There, he saw 4 flames. Only 3 more lives to live until he gets to know the truth behind Fortuna. As usual, he met his friends outside school, and they, too, noticed how he had this new air around him. They joked about how he looked like someone who just threw out his big boy movies. Tetsu then brought up how he found some magazines by the haunted apartment. They were talking about how there was no more news about the ghost there. Fuda hurriedly went back to their apartment while Rune mindlessly followed him. Rune then said that maybe he had just forgotten where he had left his magazines. That was when he realized that the ghost in that apartment was Mr. Obayashi. He stayed there, doing his duty, frantic. Fuda cried, asking Rune where he went since all he knew was that the spirit circle kills souls. But Rune assured him that he did not kill him, that Obayashi just returned to the light, where souls were supposed to go. Fuda said his thanks to Obayashi's soul, who used to reside in that place. Fuda went around to look at the place. He figured out that this was the place where Haotoru and her sister last saw each other in a fierce fight. He was crying when his friends found him. Nano was crying too, asking him if he had taken some exotic magazine. Shortly, Fuda went to the history club looking up for some things. Kuko heard him, so she brought out a book, telling him that this is what he was looking for. When he returned to their own club, Nano randomly said that she could be his nude muse. It was already dark when they went home. On their way home, they ran into Kuko and East. Kuko said that she came here to ask Fuda about something. She asked how this town was related to their past, so he told him about this place being where Haotoru died, and that he found out because he met Master Obayashi. Friday night, Fuda dreamt about Haotoru and Iwana visiting the place where they died. Then Saturday morning came. They visited the castle. He also told her what happened to the other places where they were in that life. Kuko too shared her past, how she used to be a princess in a small kingdom, but it was consumed by war, and then she became a ninja. She served the Tokugawa clan and became one of them. Fuda then said that they already ended it, that it was all over, but Kuko said that nothing is over, not as long as they were still Koko, and he is Fortuna. Fuda was insistent that their grudge ended, that was it, but Kuko was still holding on to their past as Fortuna and Koko. Fuda yelled at her, asking her if their past was really more important than their current lives. Their cycle has not ended because they were still Koko and Fortuna, and in that life, Iwana did not know what he did. Kuko went on, asking him if he would still say that if he found out about what Fortune did, if he would still sympathize with him or with Koko. Frustrated, Fuda asked Kuko what Fortuna really did, so he could understand. Kuko was about to tell him everything when East stopped her. East said the Fuda wanted to see his past life for himself, and he will eventually learn what had happened on his own, so Kuko gave up the thought. Kuko then walked, but Fuda remained standing. She asked him what he was doing because they still had places to go to. To lighten up the mood, Rune said, "Let's go on a date." The two of them were now blushing. Fuda was feeling nervous because even though Kuko hated him so much, he still couldn't bring himself to hate her. The other two were now cheering on him, saying he could do it. Kuko said that she didn't want to stay long in that place because she noticed that there were a lot of stragglers. Just then, he realized that Matsu-san was his mom. They then brought up the thing where the two of them saw spirits, and Kuko said that maybe it had something to do with their chakras. The two proceeded to go to the places where Iwana and Hautaru went. The two of them were now wondering what happened to Akari and the head priest. They both thought that Akari must have cried so hard when she found out that the two of them had died. Their last spot was the meeting spot where the both of them died. It was now a cafe, literally a perfect spot for meeting up. They were now wondering what happened to Rihama and Jinkuru. Kuko then said that maybe Yumi and Tetsu were their descendants. Just thinking about that possibility made him cry. Then all of a sudden Tetsu and Yumi came, asking if Kuko made him cry. Then Yumi went ahead to take a photo of their date. The two of them explained that the place was near the dojo, so they come here often because they get hungry right after that. The two of them kept teasing Kuko and Fuda. The two of them revealed that they were related second cousins, they said, and it was Yumi's grandfather's dojo they were going to. Hearing this made Fuda cry even more. Tetsu was surprised to see Fuda crying. He's been acting crazy lately. He was just glad that they met again. Kuko and Fuda clarified that the two of them weren't on a date just as the two of them went away. When he arrived home, he then shared a meal with his parents, thinking how glad he was to be born from them. Shortly after that, he went to bed and brought out the spirit circle, and then he leapt through the past life. He was not in a rush or anything, but he did want to see Rei again. He saw Fortuna again and said that since he wouldn't shut up about Rei, he would show her to him. Fortuna told Fuda that he could not see Rei again. When Fortuna said that, Fuda grabbed him. Fortuna was impressed that he got to catch him, saying that he must be someone who experienced his past life on a deep level. Fuda grabbed Fortuna and screamed in his ear, telling him to shut up. Fuda told him to stop acting so smart when he was just like him and that he ranked 220 out of 260 in his class. Fortuna said that he was impossibly stupid. Fuda asked him to tell him what happened so that he could understand, but Fortuna replied that he would let him see this past life and interpret what happened as he sees fit. Since this one is close to explain what he did in his first life, he also told him that his life with Rei has already ended and that Rei has nothing more to learn from him. Fortuna told him that his next life was his favorite and that it was interesting. He then delved once again into his other life. Fuda then woke up to his other life. This one, he was touring the center of the non-living spirit management. The sleeping tower. It is a place where only human hands can clean. The egg-shaped thing told him that he will now leave him here because the manager will lead him inside. In this life his name is Lafall. This place is made of 20% admin and 80% cleaning. Though robots handle most of the administration stuff, all the cleaning must be done by hand. Lafall said that it was supposed to be the opposite, and then Claro, the manager, said that it was an emotional thing. They arrived at the place where the group was gathered, and he met everyone. He, too, met Lapis, who had her right hand and left artificial leg, a mirror image of him. She was then tasked to train Lafall. Lapis taught him everything he had to learn about cleaning while they were on it. Lapis asked him if he was related to non-living people as well because most people who worked there had non-living relatives. Lapis told him that if he knew their codes, then he could go and see them. Lafall hurriedly ran and called his guide and requested their number. There he saw their brains floating. He was telling them that he will protect them. These are the non-living people, people who have lost their bodies and only use electrical signals to dream. Their lives live in the world of dreams. That is the reason why this is called the Sleeping Tower, the oldest one to have been kept. In this world they have 10 billion non-living creatures and 500 million living ones. All the people who have died from disease and all other things were mostly placed on the tower, and from that day forward no non-living creature had died yet. It was already the 34th century, they were on the verge of extinction. Lafall woke up suddenly, his heart racing like he'd just had a nightmare. When he opened his eyes, the bright sunlight made him pause. It was a sunny morning, very different from the rainy dreams he had been having lately. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of unease, and heard his guide's voice telling him to go to the cafeteria for breakfast. He got up and quickly adjusted the alarm settings on his bed before heading out. On his way to the cafeteria, his guide suggested he eat a salad because of a vitamin deficiency. But Lafall wasn't in the mood for something healthy. When he walked in, he saw Lapis sitting at a table. She looked at his plate of fried food with a disapproving glance. Even the guide seemed to be judging him. Fried food again, Lafall, Lapis said, raising an eyebrow. Lafall shrugged, not really caring. He sat down with her, and they both turned to watch the news. The broadcast showed that an anti-terrorist group called Aryan had taken responsibility for a recent attack. The news was heavy and serious. Lapis clicked the remote and changed the channel. "I don't want to watch this," she muttered. "Change it to something educational." Lafall wasn't interested in anything serious, so he suggested, "How about something funny?" Lapis rolled her eyes but agreed, and soon, they were watching a comedy show. As they ate, they started talking about work. Lapis mentioned that Taka-san would be quitting next week. He's been really stressed out, Lapis said. He said he just can't do it anymore. Lafol nodded, thinking about how much things had changed. At that moment, their manager, Claro, walked in. He asked them a strange question that neither of them expected. "What do you think about non-living creatures?" he asked, his tone serious. "Do you think they're alive? Ever seen a ghost?" Lapis and Lafol exchanged confused looks. Lapis finally answered with a hint of sarcasm. "I think I already missed my chance to quit." Lafol's thoughts drifted. The question reminded him of a memory from his childhood. He remembered the day he went with his aunt and uncle to visit his parents' work. It was supposed to be a normal day, but everything changed in an instant. There was an explosion. His aunt and uncle were killed, and Lafol lost his limbs in the blast. He was sent to a facility after that, growing up without a family. As Lafol thought about this, he saw Taka stand up and announce that he was quitting. It was a big change for their team, and Lafol could feel the shift in the air. Suddenly, a brief flash of something from his past appeared in his mind. Haotoru's past life. He remembered the head priest, a man who looked strangely like Talio. At that moment, Lafol saw a figure, a ghost wearing a hoodie, its face hidden in shadow. He froze, staring at the figure. Was it real, or was it just his mind playing tricks on him? Talio told Lafol about the ghost he saw. He said the ghost was wearing a hoodie and was walking through the floor like he wasn't fully alive or fully dead. Talio said it felt like the man was stuck between life and death. Just as they were talking, they heard footsteps behind them. It was Claro, their manager, who saw them kneeling on the floor. They explained what Talio had seen, and Claro didn't say much, but he took Talio to his office. He told Talio not to tell anyone about the ghost. The next day, Lafol asked Talio what happened in the office, but Talio just shook his head. He said he couldn't talk about it, that he had been told not to say anything. Just then, they saw Lapis. Lafol, Talio, and Lapis then went about their work, cleaning the place. While they worked, Lafol talked about how Talio might like alcohol. He thought about a time when he, Talio, and his uncle were together. They all seemed like they were people with no direction, while Claro looked at them with disgust. But to Lafol's surprise, Talio didn't drink. People had always assumed Talio was a heavy drinker, but he wasn't. Later that night, Lafol had the same dream again. In this dream, he gave Talio a drink. It felt real, but he knew it was just a dream. Every day followed the same routine, cleaning and what they called flights or dreams. Lafol could control the dreams, making them what he wanted. He spent time with Lapis, eating and telling stories. Even when he ate, he felt a little hazy, as if he was somewhere else. In one dream, he was someone named Fortuna, eating baked goods from the east. His food had gotten better, but his studies about souls were still lacking. In the dream, he was with Coco, who said she had studied up to chapter 5. Suddenly, Claro pulls Lafol out of the dream. Claro told him to meet him in his office later. They would soon be looking into the cases of Lafol's relatives. When Lafol arrived at the office, Claro told him that most people quit once they reach the cases of their relatives. He told Lafol he would need to turn in his resignation a month before that day came. Lafol thought about it carefully. He didn't want to leave, especially since Talio and Lapis would be sad. But after thinking it through, he decided he wouldn't quit. Time passed, and Claro fell ill and died. He didn't stay as a non-living creature, though, because his illness attacked their rooms. After that, Talio became the new manager. In Talio's 10th year, he and Lapis were drinking together. That night, they saw a hooded ghost again, walking through the floor. The ghost introduced himself as Spacifica and said they were going to be the next manager of the tower. He warned them not to mess with humanity's experience. The three later met at the manager's office when Talio called out for the two of them for an interrogation. Lapis recalled that the ghost named Spacifica told them not to pervert humankind's experience of death. They didn't tell anyone about their encounter, which is great because Talio ordered them not to tell anyone, especially Lapis. To start, Spacifica was a mystery that couldn't be seen even on the recording devices. Only two looked surprised in the hallway alone. Past managers have seen the ghost while the other employees have not. But as the allegation and the ghost said, they are now candidates for manager positions. Their discussion was far from over, so Talio asked them to meet him at the basement hall area 12 for a study group. That's the lowest floor of the tower, but there's something else lower than it, and with the code name Area Spacifica, they went to an ancient-looking lab. There, Talio told them about the truth of humanity's decline. It is said that in the 22nd century, the population exceeded 12 billion, but because of wars, it dropped drastically to 3 billion. However, the truth is that warfare cornered humankind because the government hid it from everyone and trained humankind to despise conflict. They later developed superhumans, but those humans refused to reproduce, and the birth rate dropped sharply. So, the unified government prohibited special medicine and sealed technology away. This led to the rise of robots, and because humankind has become dependent on them, the government has sealed away excessive technologies to that day. The meaning of life has lost its principle, and death was perverted thanks to the sleeping tower. The first manager first saw Spacifica and heard its warning, but he refused and said that humanity had realized the hypocrisy of the non-living long ago, so non-humans should stay out of it. This information was so much for Lafall and Lappies that they pondered on it as they tried to fall asleep. Every day off they have, Talio holds lectures in the basement that make Lafall's blood boil the more he knows the government's intentions. Talio also mentioned that the sleeping tower conducted research to revive the non-living, but it failed. Because of seeing a ghost one night, they have now gotten themselves involved in something unbelievable. Lappies wondered if they should conduct research on forbidden subjects, which is something terrorists would do. Lafall can't accept himself under the same category as them, as he snapped out on Lappies. He said that the terrorists are against technology and want to kill human intelligence, which is the complete opposite of what the managers have been doing. Seeing how bitter Lafall is when it comes to terrorists, Lappies assumes that he has a grievance with them. So, Lafall opened up that they were targeted in the orbiting elevator, an incident that killed his uncle Eisen and the others, including his parents. That's how he got his artificial arm and leg, unlike Lappies, who lost her original limbs because her father experimented on her and took her limbs by force. But because of this conversation, the two grew closer together. Time passed, and their juniors quit one by one, leaving Lafall, Lappies, and Talio as the oldest employees. One day, Lafall had a dream when he was in Hautaru and saw the priest handing him a drink, which he accepted. Thanks to that, Hautaru finally got to repay his debt and ascended to heaven with Koko's past life. Lafall woke up that day talking to himself, still half asleep. That same afternoon, Talio died in an accident. Lappies and Lafall became the first co-managers in the tower's history. Talio's brain was put in the sleeping tower, where Lappies didn't label him as dead but as one of the non-living. Now, the two won't be cleaning any of the cases, thanks to the promotion. And since there weren't any suitable candidates, they were chosen as co-managers despite their insufficient skills. They still had to fulfill their duty and decided to divide the work. Lappies will take on the work with the employees and robots, while Lafall will manage the non-living. He was silent at first but later realized that he gotta look over 100 million non-living, so that's not fair. But they had to do their responsibility as the new managers because Talio had died, at least from his perspective. In the end, Lafall's job was more chill than Lappies, who had to constantly check on every robot and employee there. A robot then offered her tea and mentioned that they had a message from Talio. It was a handwritten note given to this robot the day before Talio left for the city. It's been a week since then, and as they quickly checked the content of the letter, Lafall immediately went to the Spacifica area and went inside one of the rooms, where he found a cold sleep device. Inside it is a girl named Carol, Claro's daughter, who is a genetically modified designer baby. It is a prohibited technology, but they have to take care of her for the sake of Talio and Carol. By the time Lappies came into the room, Lafall was already reading the manuals and had to teach themselves the process to keep Carol alive. Finally, the time has come for Carol to be fully finished thawing, and she smiles at them as the first thing she does. Seeing Carol made Lafall feel like they exist for this child. After they got Carol to bed and relaxed, Carol asked about her father, something they had to lie for her sake. Carol didn't say much about it and just smiled before introducing herself to them. She was put to sleep to wait for the cure of a certain disease, and since Claro and Talio completed the cure, the 3-month thawing process began. However, Talio got into an accident, making Lafall wonder if Talio intended for her to live away from society. The thought of that made Lappies uncomfortable, so she talked to Lafall about it while they were in the middle of giving Carol her daily medicine for a week. Anyway, Lappies asked Lafall to go upstairs while she takes care of her, something Lafall doesn't want to do. But Lappies also asked him to look up how to acquire a family register, but the fastest way is to get married. And so, Lappies proposed to Lafall that it surprised him. This is for Carol's sake because Lappies wants to give her a proper place to live, and she needs Lafall's help to do it. Sure, she's made of prohibited technologies by the government, but she deserves to see the world and live a normal life as an ordinary child. Lappies can't sacrifice her life to her father's human experiments. With that, Lafall was convinced, and they decided to get married. But first, they brought this great news to Carol, who immediately understood. Afterward, the new couple announced their marriage and their child to the employees, who were very surprised to hear this as if it was something unbelievable. Meanwhile, getting Carol's ID was a piece of cake. Thanks to their reputation as the manager of the sleeping tower, they were able to tweak some info to make Carol a legitimate child. Since then, the three have grown close to each other, and their pretend family has become a real one. They even plan on going out to the lake at the west during their day off, where they talk about Lafall going to the city for work. Lappies was worried about this and warned him to be careful because she got a hunch that Talio's accident wasn't an ordinary accident. And with that, Lafall saw his brother Ash while he was in the city. Ash, Lafall's brother, was surprised to see him there after they had left the facility. He heard about him being the manager of the tomb, referring to the sleeping tower. Ash walks closer to Lafall, and that's when he notices that Ash has grown taller. But Ash doesn't like it when Lafall is acting like an older brother. They were laughing it off, but Lafall's face suddenly turned serious, and they told Ash to quit being a terrorist. That took him aback because how would he know about his hidden career? Lafall only had a hunch about it, but Ash quickly confirmed it as well. Lafall encouraged Ash to start over and wash his hands, but that made it worse. Ash yelled at him, reminding him not to act like an older brother because he's not. He covered his mouth, trying to compose himself and not make a scene, which also surprised Lafall. Afterward, Ash mentioned that they didn't meet by coincidence, and it was his job to stop the manager, which is Lafall. He warned him that in a few minutes, an AI-driven vehicle would malfunction and crash into him, so he ordered him to put his guard between him and the road. Not only that, but he snitched on his organization Orione and told Lafall that they were researching black hole bombs. Ash disagrees with this plan because one small mistake could lead to humanity's extinction completely. It's his plan to change the organization and resist, not wanting to give in to its passion and desperation. He may eat Lafall, but he doesn't want him to die in front of him. A few minutes after that, a vehicle crashed towards Lafall, but thanks to the guard robot, he was saved. A few days after he went back from the city, Lappies noticed that Lafall erased the log of the robot after the incident, and wanted to know who he was talking to while he was on the sidewalk. Lafall refuses to explain, and Lappies can't do much about it. But Lafall was in deep thought about how Lappies managed to find out that the government supports the terrorists, and how Orione, the terrorists, and the government know that the sleeping tower has been conducting forbidden research. However, the opinions within the government are divided. One side wishes to preserve the forbidden research, while the others won't tolerate it. The same goes for Orione, and since the two sides can't make up their minds, the sleeping tower continues. Heck, they might even know about Carol, too, but so far, so good. Lafall suddenly hugged his foster daughter for no reason. Only a feeling that he would do anything for her and a future for humanity. He was so deep into thought lately that Lappies thinks he's acting strange. She wants him to open up to her as a married couple, but they haven't ever held hands, so why would they open up to each other? The only time they've held hands was during her proposal, and it didn't happen again. Lappies mentioned that the incident might be Orione's doing, thinking that he would get riled up about it, but it was the opposite. Because of what Ash said, the hatred in his heart faded. For now, he tells her that nothing is more important than Carol, and Lappies feels the same. As Lafall patrolled the hallways, he passed by some employees and asked them the same question. Do you believe the non-living are alive? And have you ever seen a ghost? None of the employees answered right, so he's having trouble finding a successor. Several years have passed since he heard about the black hole bomb, and so far, civilization hasn't been destroyed yet. Carol has also grown so big and smart that she made Robocat, the Sphinx. There were other new employees, such as Aaliyah and Atari. So, Lafall once again asked them the traditional question, and this time, he noticed how the two were answering like they were unsure, which might be a good sign for a successor. Talio's words, Ash, and Spacifica have been on a loop in Lafall's mind, and that's when he realizes that if the sleeping tower is a trap of the human's soul, which is why they are not being reborn, causing the birth rate to drop sharp. Because of this clarity, Lafall has gone crazy over the realization he just had that might be right. Another day at work, Lappies and Lafall were talking about who they thought fit in as the successor of the sleeping tower. Lafall thinks that Aaliyah is a good choice, but only those who have seen the ghost can ultimately become the manager. Lappies isn't comfortable telling anyone about the secret of the basement, but it seems like nobody will see the ghost anymore. And if that were to happen, they always have Carol. Lafall sees her as a prodigy, but Lappies wants to pretend like she's an ordinary girl. And that's how their misunderstanding occurs again. As Lafall was patrolling the tower, he found Carol and Aaliyah talking so passionately, and Robocat saw him and approached him, getting Carol and Aaliyah's attention. He was glad to see that the two seemed close, wondering what they were discussing. Without a hint of hiding, Carol said that they were planning on going on a trip together, so that made Lafall think that the two must be dating. Carol didn't even hide it, and Aaliyah stood up in respect, thanking Lafall for letting him date his daughter. His jaw dropped because he hadn't even given this man his blessing to date their only daughter, but he couldn't be a bad dad, so he supported them. So, back to the trip, the couple wasn't sure where to go yet as Carol asked for a recommendation. Lafall hasn't gone away from the tower for years, so he doesn't know a good trip. There was a notification on his wrist that he must attend to, so he bid farewell to the couple and went down the area Pacifica, where he met up with Ash. Lafall showed him the weapons that the past managers researched, giving Ash permission to use them. Since every manager has their own forbidden research, Ash asked about Lafall. He responds that he's researching superhumans, the very subject that drove humanity to the brink. Ash said jokingly that if he were to succeed in his plan, he would kill Lafall first to stop him from bringing back the superhumans. However, Lafall wanted to know if the sleeping tower was one of the targets for terrorist attacks because he had a plan to halt the tower. It's his intention to release all the souls of the non-living and return them to heaven. This sounds so absurd and profound to Ash that he bursts out laughing. He can't believe that his brother has such bloodlust to become a super mass murderer. But the pressure won't be on him only, so he pointed out that Ash shouldn't fail or they would have bigger problems. Fast forward to when they met again, and Orion was getting close to developing the bomb while Ash was rising to the top ranks. One day, Lafall saw Carol tinkering on Robocat's head. He said that they should go on a trip to New Zealand, the opposite side of the planet. There was a brief silence between them, and that's when Lafall asked if she could still remember the basement. Carol replied that she did, even when she first met them. Lafall gave her permission to visit the basement again, which was awkward because Carol already knew her way to the basement and had explored even deeper. Afterward, Lafall asked about Carol's research, which was time machines. She explained her findings and said that she made a small probe, and even though it observes the same point of space-time in the past, every time the lightning strikes differently. She was conducting this research away from her parents' knowledge, which isn't a big deal for Lafall. Instead, he was proud. The day had come near, and it was time to put everything into action. Lafall's soul rested well, knowing that Carol was away from the tower right before he planned to do the unthinkable. The time has come, and Lafall turned off all the robots' security systems. Lapis has a gun in her hand in an attempt to stop Lafall from getting close to the system. However, Lafall wasn't alone in this plan. He got Abib, Kites, Staub, and Horf virtually telling him not to ruin the plan. They are the managers of the sleeping tower from other countries who have joined forces to make their goal happen. In their perspective, shutting the tower would save the souls, something that opposes Lapis's perspective. After explaining it to Lapis, part of her knew about it, so it's only right to continue their plan. However, the betrayal she feels is far worse, and the two have wielded their guns at each other, which feels more natural. Lafall was shot in the shoulder, so he ran toward the system, not noticing Robocat was on the way. Lapis once again tried to shoot Lafall but missed, and that's how Robocat interfered in the fight. It exclaimed that couples shouldn't fight, but what's more surprising is how it was still functioning despite Lafall turning off the system for all robots. It explained that it's operating on a separate system since it's one of Carol's original creations. Also, it has its own manager's clearance because Carol granted it, which confused them because not even Carol has control over who should get the manager's clearance. Anyway, Robocat is programmed to stop Carol's parents from fighting, and that gives them a bit of time to reflect. But Lafall decides that it shouldn't affect him. So, he continued to run towards the system. Lapis can't let him, once again wielding her sword towards him, which makes Robocat panic. Words can't stop the couple, so Robocat has to take the guns by force. First, it went towards Lapis's gun before running towards Lafall's gun and snatching it like he was the Flash. Lapis told Robocat to pin Lafall down. But even though it's fast, Robocat is weak enough to be easily kicked out like that. Lafall finally reached the system, and without hesitation, Lafall said that the code Spirit Circle should be used to turn all non-living support systems off. As if his body was in a stance, a curse, he felt a drop of doubt and regret. But it was too late. He and the other managers from other countries killed 100 million people. Lapis, getting too emotional, screamed in pain as the two aimed at each other's head. As they shoot, RoboCat once again interferes and takes the bullet. That's when a flashback of their past life showed up with the Sphinx standing tall in front of Roca and Floors. The Sphinx and the RoboCat were once a symbol that would make everyone smile, which is why she loves them so much. She wishes to create something cute like that and make everyone feel good to stop them from fighting. And that was RoboCat's job. However, in the next moment, everything suddenly fell apart. Most people in that world probably didn't understand what was happening. But Ash failed, and not only did he fail, but the experiment, the black hole bomb, ran out of control. In a split second, everything turned into nothing, and as Lafal saw the waterfall of light, everything in that world vanished. Fuda woke up with a yell and fright, knowing that the Earth was destroyed. He surprised Rune with his screaming, but she remained composed and greeted her master as usual. Fuda was unsure about how his past life took place in the future, and just like Lafal, his aura was a bit too serious and nonchalant. He thinks that Ishigami hasn't seen the future yet, so he decides to keep it to himself for now. However, when they saw each other in school, the first thing Ishigami asked was if he already saw the future. She mentioned that she didn't know what happened at the very end, but all she knows is how dangerous Fuda was. He felt so heavy that he decided to stay on the roof for a while, which worries Rune and East, but they can't do much about it. There, he lay down, trying to watch another of his past lives, but Rune can't let him because it's too dangerous. And so, she snatched the spirit circle from his hand and flew away without letting him know where. After Rune left, Fuda didn't know what to do, so he sat on the stairs and told Coco about what he had tried to do, which made Rune run away. Of course, Coco knows the dangers of seeing the next life too soon after the other, so she scolded Fuda about it. She reminded him that he didn't give it enough time when they were not in a hurry. And now, the past lives are affecting him, so she wouldn't be surprised if Rune would interrupt his attempt to dive into the next past life. Fuda was calm like how Lafal was, thinking that he wasn't consumed by the personalities of his past life, which was clearly a lie. So, East volunteered to look for Rune, and if he promised not to see his past life, then he could convince Rune to come back. Fuda can't promise that, though, so they have no choice but to take care of Rune, then the three of them would be reunited. Coco got excited over the thought and smiled at East's plan. Fuda doesn't seem to oppose the idea, knowing that Rune would be better taken care of if she were with them. Still, he's going to be looking for her at school. A few minutes later, East went on his way as Fuda and Coco were about to go back. However, Coco spoke and said that it was better for her to hate him when his past life would jumble up his personality because the Fuda she knows was a good kid. She sees him as a harbinger of disaster, just like Lafal and Fortuna, so she hopes he'll remain someone she can hate forever. Fuda didn't say anything and simply asked what she's gonna do once she killed him. To his surprise, Coco already has a plan for that, even if it means going to juvenile detention before getting her life sorted once she gets out. She even went far beyond that because that's how much she has thought it through, unlike him, who doesn't know what to do with his future. Later that day, class had already ended, and it was time for him to look for Rune. Nano was there to fetch him, thinking they'd go together for their club. However, looking at her face reminded him of Carol that he felt awkward, and went away, making his friends worry. Fuda looked for Rune everywhere, including the park, their house, going back to the streets, and even the train stations. The day was ending, and he hadn't seen Rune yet. He was walking at the overpass when he came across his friends, except for Nano. They were worried about Fuda, and they assured him that they would help him with his academics if someone was bullying him, and even about his love life. They got it all wrong, of course, because they were oblivious to what was really happening. Still, Fuda was being avoidant because he couldn't shake up the thought of the world ending and how he killed millions of lives thinking it was the right thing. A sense of doubt filled his head, and he burst out and yelled that he did the right thing for humanity. But it was too much for him to handle, so he bumped his head on a tree. Coco was there to watch him being dramatic but stayed silent by the bench as he pondered on his life. However, Coco wanted to know what the explosion at the end was, and when Fuda told him about it, she didn't even know how to cope with the information. The only thing that would relieve her is to punch him in the face. She felt as if Lappy's and her hard work went down to waste. Fuda tried to calm her down, but she punched him again, and Lafal's soul popped out of him. Because of that, Fuda is able to think straight, telling Coco that there's a way for them to save the Earth because Fuda is Lafal's next life. Besides, there's no guarantee that it's where their future would lead because, according to Carol's research, no matter how many times she watched the same event at the same time, the lightning would strike differently. This could mean that parallel universes exist and endless possibilities exist, so it's better not to give up hope yet. After a moment of clarity, Fuda thanked Coco for punching Lafal out of his head. As for Coco, she can't help but cry at how good of a person Fuda is that it's hard for her to hate him. Fuda didn't know what to say to comfort her, and his emotions were all over the place, bringing him to his confession that she loved Coco the moment she transferred school. Rune, East, Coco, and even Nano were surprised about it. Fuda Okia stood before Kuko Ishigami, his heart pounding. The words he had rehearsed so many times spilled out, steady despite his nerves. He was only 14, but his feelings felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Kuko listened, her scarred forehead catching the light. A flicker of something, surprise, hesitation, crossed her face, but she remained composed. Then she spoke, and her words hit Fuda like a gust of wind, leaving him stunned. He searched her face, hoping for anything to contradict what she had just said. Nearby, Nano Nanamura watched. The short-haired girl had known this moment was coming, but that didn't make it easier. Her fingers clenched, her glasses slipping slightly as her vision blurred. Then, without warning, she turned and ran, her steps desperate. Fuda caught the movement from the corner of his eye, his hand instinctively reaching out. "Nano," he called, but she didn't stop or look back. His arm lowered, a tightness forming in his chest. Later, he sat slumped on a bench, staring at the ground, the weight of everything pressed down on him. He barely noticed when Yumi approached, her long hair swaying. She clasped her hands behind her back before settling beside him. "What happened?" she asked, her tone light but laced with curiosity. Fuda hesitated, then sighed, recounting the confession and its aftermath. Yumi listened, nodding occasionally. Then, after a pause, she posed a question that made Fuda blink. Before he could respond, she leaned in closer, whispering something just for him. His breath hitched, eyes widening as he turned to look at her. But Yumi simply sat there, offering no further explanation. The moments stretched between them in the fading afternoon light. That night, Fuda lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep came slowly, his mind tangled with emotions and unanswered questions. When he finally drifted off, he dreamed. A girl stood before him, her presence serene and otherworldly. Rune. Her long hair moved as if caught in an unseen current, and her voice was calm, almost soothing when she spoke. She told him stories of the past, of a man named Fortuna and the strange, distant memories she carried. Images flickered around them as she spoke, scenes of creation, of lives lived and lost. Fuda watched in silence, absorbing every detail, a sense of unease creeping into his chest. Then, the dream shifted. He was no longer in the ethereal light but back in reality, facing Kuko again. She stood firm, her eyes locked onto his with steady determination. There was no hesitation this time, no unreadable expressions. She spoke clearly, her words sharp and deliberate. A battle to the death after he had relived his remaining past lives. Fuda's breath caught, his muscles tensing at the weight of her challenge. But before he could respond, she continued, her voice softer now, almost reluctant. Only after the battle would she reveal her true feelings. Something flickered in her gaze for a moment, something more than resolve. The weight of her words settled deep within him. He clenched his fists, exhaling slowly. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with battles he had yet to fight and truths he had yet to uncover. But as he sat there, staring at the light breaking through the horizon, one thing was certain. His story was far from over. Fuda Okia and his friends set off on a trip to Mount Fuji, their spirits high with anticipation. At 14, Fuda had already experienced things most people couldn't. He could see ghosts. But today wasn't about the supernatural. It was a simple outing with his classmates, Fuko, Shakuji, and Nanamiya. Fuko, the girl Fuda liked, carried a quiet presence. She had a scar on her forehead, just like Shakuji, her close friend. Nanamiya, another group member, had recently confessed his feelings to Fuko, a fact that weighed on Fuda's mind more than he cared to admit. As they traveled, he stole occasional glances at her, noticing how distant she seemed. Was she thinking about Nanamiya? The thought made his stomach twist, but he pushed it aside, trying to focus on the trip. When they reached their destination, a place called the Fuji Roof, the breathtaking view made them forget everything else. The flat expanse of land stretched beneath the towering mountain, a perfect place to explore. As they walked, their conversation turned personal. Shakuji, always direct, asked Fuko about her feelings for Nanamiya. She hesitated. "I don't want to ruin our friendship," she admitted. "And I don't understand love yet." Her words settled heavily in the air. Fuda, listening in silence, felt a pang of sadness he couldn't shake. Then, something strange happened. A mechanical creature shaped like a sphinx appeared in the distance. It didn't belong in the natural landscape. Its presence was an oddity that sparked immediate curiosity. They followed it without hesitation, watching it disappear into a hidden cave. Inside, an even stranger sight awaited them, an alien being. It welcomed them without hesitation as if expecting their arrival. Before they could process what was happening, another creature resembling an octopus joined them. The atmosphere inside the cave was surreal, filled with otherworldly energy that sent shivers down their spines. The beings showed them visions, images of Earth before its destruction. Landscapes they didn't recognize flashed before their eyes, including something called the Spirit Circle, and a place named Spacifica. The words meant nothing to them, but the moment's wait made them uneasy. The creatures spoke of Fortuna, a being who turned life into energy. There was also talk of a soul catcher, an object of great significance that had to be passed on. Then, in an act as abrupt as their arrival, the alien reached for Shakuji. With a touch, his forehead scar vanished. It then turned to Fuko, placing something in her hands, the soul catcher. Whatever purpose it held remained unknown. Before they could ask questions, their memories of the encounter were erased. They were sent back as if nothing had happened, their minds wiped clean of the strange beings and the secrets they had glimpsed. Fuko, now free of any lingering doubts, felt a quiet resolve settle in her heart. She decided to date Nanamiya, to keep Shakuji as a friend, and to move forward. The years passed, and she pursued a career as a geologist. But no matter how much she searched, she never found any trace of the Fuji roof or the mysteries hidden there. Meanwhile, Fuda woke up, the day's events, or was it a dream, lingering in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something important had happened, something just beyond his reach. Fuda Okya and Kuko Ishigami had always shared a complicated relationship, filled with clashes and unspoken grievances. But today, they set aside their differences. Whether it was a truce or just a temporary pause, neither of them knew. All they understood was that, for today, they would walk side by side. Their day began with a simple stroll through town. The streets were lively, filled with the hum of daily life. They wandered into various shops, where their contrasting personalities became apparent. Fuda's curiosity led him to examine every odd trinket, while Kuko's blunt nature made it clear when she thought he was wasting time. Their conversations were a mix of teasing remarks and sharp retorts, neither willing to let the other have the last word. At a cafe, they shared a meal, the atmosphere shifting between lighthearted banter and something deeper. Between mouthfuls of food, their words carried an unspoken understanding, one neither could fully articulate. Their past was complicated, yet, for a moment, the weight of it all seemed lighter. The turning point of their day came when they stopped by the river. The water moved calmly, reflecting the soft afternoon light, and Kuko's sharp edges softened for the first time. She stood there for a while before speaking, not with sarcasm, but with honesty. She told him about her past, the past life that shaped who she was. Since she could remember, memories of another existence lingered, merging with her identity. Over time, the persona of Coco had taken hold, shaping the way she saw the world. The scar on her forehead was a painful reminder of the struggle between her past and present self. Fuda listened, the puzzle pieces falling into place. For so long, he had questioned why Kuko harbored such deep resentment toward him. Now, he understood. She believed he was responsible for wrongdoings in a past life. The anger she directed at him wasn't entirely her own. It was a legacy of pain passed down through reincarnation. Despite the heaviness of their conversation, the day continued. They found themselves at a festival, where bright lanterns and lively music painted the evening in warm colors. They played games, sampled festival food, and laughed for fleeting moments. The burdens they carried didn't disappear, but they were just two people enjoying a festival for a little while. As the sun set, they climbed a hill overlooking the town. The sky burned in hues of orange and pink. Fuda voiced what had been lingering in his mind all day. He didn't want their story to be of endless revenge and suffering. He believed they could break free from the cycle that had bound them for lifetimes. Understanding and forgiveness, maybe that was the key. Kuko didn't respond right away. She watched the horizon, the wind tugging at her hair. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. As night fell, they made their way back down the hill, their footsteps steady. They walked in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that carried meaning. When they reached the point where their paths diverged, they stopped. A lingering glance passed between them, an acknowledgement of their shared day. No words were needed. Then, with a quiet nod, they turned away, each walking in opposite directions. But something had changed, and maybe, just maybe, the past would no longer have the final say. Fortuna had always been a curious child. Despite losing his parents at a young age, he found warmth under the roof of a kind innkeeper. Life in the quiet village was simple, filled with daily chores and occasional adventures. Yet, he often dreamed of distant lands and mysteries waiting to be uncovered. One day, while exploring near the forest's edge, he met a girl named Coco. There was something unusual about her, something that set her apart. She carried an air of quiet sadness but also a strength Fortuna couldn't understand. She told him she was searching for something she had lost, though she did not say what. He saw the weight of her words in her eyes, and without hesitation, he offered to help. Their journey began. But soon, Fortuna realized Coco was far from ordinary. She could speak to spirits, beings that no one else could see or hear. At first, he was fascinated, asking her endless questions about the unseen world. But there was a solemnity in the way she answered, as if her abilities were more of a burden than a gift. As they traveled, she confided in him about the prophecy that had followed her since birth. It spoke of her untimely death, an unavoidable fate that loomed over her like a shadow. Though she was resilient, Fortuna saw the fear beneath her calm exterior. He listened, unable to offer any solution, only his presence. And somehow, that seemed to be enough. Their journey led them beyond the safety of the countryside and into a grand city far larger than Fortuna had ever imagined. It was alive with people from every walk of life, merchants shouting their wares, nobles in fine clothing, and beggars lurking in alleyways. But beneath the city's grandeur, there was tension. A rebellion was brewing, a fight against the tyrant who ruled with an iron grip. Fortuna had never considered himself a fighter, but when he saw Coco's determination to push forward despite her fate, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. He joined the rebels, throwing himself into training, learning how to wield a weapon, move in battle, and survive. The days were grueling, but with each passing moment, he grew stronger, not just in skill but in understanding. Through it all, his bond with Coco deepened. The stolen moments between battles became precious to him. Their conversations, shared laughter, how she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention, it all became something he couldn't bear to lose. But the prophecy remained, an unspoken truth between them. No matter how much he wished otherwise, he couldn't change what was to come. Fortuna found himself at a crossroads as the rebellion reached its breaking point. The battle ahead would determine the fate of the city, its people, and everything they had fought for. But more than anything, he feared what it might mean for Coco. He had trained to fight, to protect, but what if it wasn't enough? What if he was powerless to stop the inevitable? In that moment, standing on the edge of something greater than himself, Fortuna realized that his journey had never just been about adventure. It had been about her. And now, he had to make a choice. An insatiable curiosity had always driven Fortuna, but his latest obsession was different. This time, it wasn't just about knowledge, it was about saving East. His friend's mysterious ailment left him searching for answers in the depths of spiritual science. For Fortuna, this was deeply personal. His journey began years ago under Master Ray, a revered scholar known for her wisdom. She had been more than just a mentor, she had shaped Fortuna's understanding of spirit matter. She had first introduced him to creating artificial spirits, though she had warned him of the dangers. When he asked whether spirits could be made, she answered honestly, it was possible, but to tread that path was to invite consequences beyond comprehension. During those years, Fortuna crossed paths with Flam, an older student who acted as a mediator between him and Master Ray. At first, Flam treated him with casual indifference, but something shifted as Fortuna's brilliance became apparent. Flam began to pull away, resentment replacing camaraderie. Clearly, he couldn't reconcile his jealousy with Fortuna's potential. One day, Fortuna accompanied Master Ray to an engineer's spirit forge, where possessed rocks were harnessed for energy. The forge fascinated him, but what truly captured his attention was the ghost of a young girl lingering near the machinery. No one else seemed to see her, and something about her presence stirred his curiosity. Acting on impulse, he stole one of the spirit-infused rocks, sensing it held a connection between the human soul and spirit matter. This act would set the course for everything that followed. Determined to save East, Fortuna began an experiment no one had attempted before. He combined the spirit of the deceased girl with the stolen rock and a fragment of his soul. The result was Rune, an artificial spirit, a creation unlike anything the world had seen. It was a breakthrough, a success beyond measure, but it also violated every known law governing life and death. When he presented Rune to Master Ray, her reaction was immediate. She was horrified. The manipulation of souls was forbidden. It disrupted the balance and tampered with forces no human had the right to control. She saw in Fortuna a gifted student and someone standing at the precipice of disaster. In a desperate attempt to stop him, Master Ray cast him out. But expulsion did not deter Fortuna. If anything, it hardened his resolve. Without Master Ray to restrain him, he delved deeper, untethered by the morality she had once tried to instill in him. His experiments grew more ambitious, culminating in the creation of the Spirit Circle, an unparalleled form of spirit matter, a dimensional ring of interference that defied classification. It was the ultimate manifestation of his genius, but proof of how far he had strayed. In the present day, Kuko Ishigami traced Fortuna's work with cautious hands, studying the intricate formula he had left behind. The scar on her forehead pulsed faintly as she tried to understand it all. The ghost of East hovered beside her, silent. She didn't fully understand the depth of what she was looking at, but an undeniable feeling crept over her. A sense of dread. A warning. Fortuna had achieved something beyond human limits. But at what cost? Fortuna's obsession with saving East had driven him to the spirit forges, ancient relics capable of refining spiritual energy. He had heard the warnings but dismissed them. If there was a chance to transcend mortality and free East from his fragile body, nothing else mattered. Before leaving, he gave Rune a simple instruction: be ready. His voice was cold, stripped of emotion. There was no space for hesitation. His only goal was to achieve the impossible. When he arrived at the towering facility, a figure emerged from the shadows, Spacifica, a being of unknown origin. Their voice carried an ominous weight. You are not ready. Turn back before you bring ruin upon yourself in this world. But Fortuna saw only confirmation of his brilliance. If such a powerful entity had noticed him, he surely was on the right path. He did not falter. Inside the forge chamber, he activated the spirit circle. Power surged through him, and 7 flames roared to life, a sign he had reached the 7th spirit level. He had surpassed human limits, broken the chains binding lesser beings to their mortality. Yet, the forges were never meant to withstand such manipulation. The air grew thick with unstable energy, and soon the chamber cracked under pressure. The first explosion came suddenly, a burst of power tearing through the walls, sending fire and debris into the sky. The destruction spread in an instant. The chain reaction ignited every spirit forged in the city. Towers collapsed, streets split, and buildings crumbled as chaos swallowed districts. What was once a thriving civilization became a nightmare of flames. Thousands fled, but there was nowhere safe to run. Coco arrived too late. She stood frozen, breathless, staring at the devastation. Smoke choked the streets, the screams of the dying echoed through the ruins, and the scent of burning bodies lingered in the air. She staggered forward, searching for something in the madness. Then, at the heart of it all, she saw him. Fortuna. He stood untouched, calm amidst the wreckage as if the destruction was nothing more than an afterthought. Fortuna. Her voice was barely a whisper. What have you done? But Fortuna's thoughts were elsewhere. He had done what was necessary. The energy had allowed him to complete his goal, transforming East into a living spirit untethered by human frailty. His friend would live. The mission was a success. But the cost? 20,000 lives. Days passed. The fires burned out, leaving behind smoldering ruins. The city that had once stood proud was now ash. Survivors wandered the wreckage, searching for the dead for answers. Coco found Fortuna again, standing at the edge of what remained. 20,000, she said. That's how many died. Her voice was empty, pleading for some sign of regret, some trace of the man he used to be. But Fortuna did not speak. His expression did not waver. The weight of thousands of lives meant nothing to him compared to what he had accomplished. Coco understood then. The man she had once trusted and cared for was gone. In his place stood something cold, unreachable. The space between them had become an abyss. And so, they moved forward, but not together. The world they once knew was lost forever. Fortuna stood in a desolate graveyard, his once youthful face now marked by an unkempt beard. Time had hardened him. The damp earth beneath his feet reeked of decay, the air thick with death. His gaze swept over the tombstones with detached calm, as if studying another experiment rather than the resting places of the dead. Slowly, he activated his spirit circle. The ground trembled, cracks splitting the soil like dark veins. Skeletal hands clawed their way up, entire corpses following. Hollow eyes glowing with eerie light. The silence shattered with the sickening sound of shifting bones and crumbling flesh. Fortuna watched, unmoved. This was no longer magic. It was knowledge in motion, the next step in understanding life and death. A voice interrupted. Coco had arrived, breath uneven, fists clenched. Sorrow and determination burned in her eyes. She took in the horror, the lifeless bodies standing under Fortuna's command, and struggled to contain the storm inside her. Why? Her voice trembled. How did you come to this? Fortuna barely looked at her. His tone was eerily calm. Human lives are no different from spirit stones. They are simply tools to be used. Coco felt something inside her break. The man she had once admired was gone. He had become something else, cold, detached, consumed by knowledge without regard for consequence. Desperate, she acted recklessly. With a sudden movement, she seized the spirit circle from East, Fortuna's longtime spirit companion. A surge of energy coursed through her, making her entire being tremble. The air crackled with power, drawing the attention of those nearby. A crowd gathered, eyes wide with unease. Coco turned to them, her voice steady. She told them everything, the truth of Fortuna's actions, the horrors he had committed in pursuit of knowledge. At first, they hesitated, struggling to grasp the weight of her words. Then, disbelief turned to fear, then to anger. Realizing the danger, Coco fled east by her side, the spirit circle still in her grasp. She had no plan, only the knowledge that she had to escape, that she had to stop Fortuna before it was too late. She and East evaded capture for days, but Fortuna's forces were relentless. Eventually, they were cornered in another graveyard, the air thick with silence. Fortuna's guards closed in, their presence suffocating. With no other option, Coco acted. Channeling the spirit circle's power, she called upon the dead beneath them. The air grew heavy with supernatural energy as the long-buried corpses rose, their decayed forms stumbling forward, eyes burning with eerie light. The guards faltered. A simple capture mission had become a nightmare, a battle between the living and the dead. The reanimated surged forward, movements jerky yet filled with intent. Bones clashed against steel, desperation met duty, and the graveyard turned into a battlefield. From the shadows, Rune watched. She had been Fortuna's companion, but now, everything she believed in, life, death, morality, was unraveling. She had once believed in noble causes, the pursuit of knowledge, and doing what was right. But watching Coco wield the same magic as Fortuna, she couldn't help but wonder, at what point did one become the very thing they sought to destroy? Coco desperately tried to stop something terrible before it went too far. Yet Rune saw the weight of the cost. There was no simple answer, no clear right or wrong. Only choices, consequences, and the thin thread of morality so easily broken. As the battle raged, Rune remained in the shadows, lost in thought, wondering how long that thread would hold before it snapped completely. Fortuna stood amidst the ruined city, his gaze fixed on the destruction he had caused. What was once a thriving place of life and hope now lay in rubble, the weight of his actions pressing on his heart. His expression was a mixture of sorrow and resignation, as though he knew nothing could undo the havoc he had wrought. The silence of devastation was broken only by the occasional gust of wind, carrying the remnants of his past ambitions. The narrative shifts back in time, unveiling Fortuna's earlier years as a passionate, driven researcher. He was engrossed in his work and his study, surrounded by ancient tomes and the dim glow of candlelight. His focus was unshakable as he meticulously scribbled notes, forming theories about the soul and reincarnation. His obsession with unraveling life and death consumed him, leading him deeper into forbidden knowledge. During this time, Fortuna met Coco, a kind-hearted woman with a natural gift for magic. Their first encounter was by chance, with Coco seeking guidance to control her growing abilities. Fortuna, recognizing her potential, eagerly took her under his wing. As they trained together, their bond grew stronger. They practiced spells, laughed at small joys, and conversed deeply about fate and destiny. But as their relationship deepened, tension emerged. Coco's growing feelings for Fortuna remained unspoken, while Fortuna, lost in his pursuit of knowledge, failed to notice. Though they remained close, an undeniable distance formed, not in their work but their hearts. As years passed, Fortuna's ambition overshadowed everything, including Coco. His experiments grew reckless, dabbling in magic that tampered with nature. He became obsessed with the spirit circle, the force governing life and death. Determined to unlock its secrets, he conducted dangerous rituals, believing they would grant him insight into the afterlife. Coco, sensing the danger, confronted him. Their argument was heated, Coco pleading for him to stop. She warned of the consequences of meddling with forces beyond comprehension, emphasizing life's sanctity. But Fortuna, blinded by his pursuit, dismissed her. Their bond frayed, and heartbroken Coco could do nothing but watch as he descended further. Determined to prove himself, Fortuna attempted a grand ritual. The air was thick with tension as forbidden incantations filled the space. Energy swirled violently, and a foreboding sense loomed over the scene. As the ritual peaked, everything went wrong. A massive explosion of magic tore through the city, obliterating everything in its wake. When Fortuna awoke, he found himself amidst the wreckage, unscathed but horrified. His heart pounded as he searched desperately for survivors. His eyes finally landed on Coco, gravely injured amidst the debris. Her once bright eyes, full of warmth, now reflected pain and betrayal. In her dying moments, Coco spoke, her words heavy with sorrow. She mourned the innocent lives lost, the shattered dreams of their once shared future. As she passed in his arms, Fortuna was left to face the full weight of his actions. The scene concluded with Fortuna standing alone in the desolation, tears streaming down his face. He had sought wisdom but had become the harbinger of ruin. The devastation he had caused could never be undone, and the journey he once hoped would lead to enlightenment had instead led to unimaginable tragedy. The scene continues as Fuda and his companions, including Kuko Ishigami and East, face Fortuna in a desolate, otherworldly landscape. Standing before them, Fortuna exudes an air of superiority, his presence both intimidating and overwhelming. He taunts Fuda, mocking him for his past failures and the futility of his attempts to defy him. Fortuna highlights Fuda's repeated struggles against him across countless lifetimes, each ending in defeat. Yet, Fuda remains undeterred. His expression is resolute as he steps forward, his determination steady. With clarity in his voice, Fuda declares that he will break the cycle of reincarnation and face Fortuna once and for all. Kuko stands by Fuda's side, her presence a reminder of the bond they have shared through numerous lifetimes. Their connection is evident, and together they face the challenge ahead. As the battle begins, without hesitation, Fortuna launched his attack. A barrage of energy surged toward them, powerful and relentless. Fuda and his allies moved in tandem, dodging and countering as best they could. Every strike they landed barely made a difference, as Fortuna's power loomed over them like an unshakable force. The battle tested the limits of their endurance, each passing moment bringing them closer to exhaustion. Desperation pushed Fuda to reach deep within himself. He called upon the echoes of his past lives, summoning the strength and knowledge accumulated through centuries of existence. The surge of energy coursed through him, fueling his movements with newfound intensity. With a swift, decisive strike, he managed to wound Fortuna, a momentary triumph that sent a ripple through the battlefield. Yet, Fortuna was unfazed. He recovered almost instantly, countering with a force that sent shockwaves through the landscape. The ground trembled beneath them, and the air seemed to distort under the weight of their clashing powers. The sky darkened, an ominous sign of the battle's escalating intensity. Kuko, sensing the growing danger, urged caution, but the momentum of the fight left little room for hesitation. Fortuna capitalized on the brief distraction. Gathering his energy, he summoned an immense sphere of destruction, its sheer presence radiating devastation. Without hesitation, he hurled it toward Fuda and his allies, intent on ending the battle in a single, decisive blow. Fuda reacted instantly. Drawing upon every last ounce of strength, he formed a barrier, a final act of defiance against Fortuna's overwhelming force. The impact was cataclysmic, the explosion engulfing the battlefield in a blinding light. The sheer power of the collision sent shockwaves in all directions, shaking the very fabric of their reality. As the dust began to settle, Fuda's body lay motionless, battered and broken. Kuko rushed to his side, her expression concerned as she checked for any sign of life. Fortuna observed from a distance, his expression unreadable. Amusement flickered in his gaze, but something else was, perhaps a twinge of frustration at Fuda's persistence or merely the satisfaction of seeing his opponent fall once more. The battle had reached a critical point, but its outcome remained uncertain. The fate of Fuda and his companions hung in the balance, leaving the conflict far from over. Fortuna had been a presence within Fuda, silent, waiting, watching. But today, he was louder, pressing against the edges of Fuda's mind, asserting himself with an intensity that made it hard to think. It wasn't just about control, it was about purpose. Fortuna had lived countless lives, each filled with ambition, struggle, and relentless pursuit of something greater. Fuda had always longed for something simpler. As their spirits tangled within a single body, their conflicting desires clashed more fiercely than ever. Before Fuda could process this growing internal battle, his father approached him, his face lined with worry. His mother had gone into labor. She was rushed to the hospital, and the birth was imminent. Under normal circumstances, this would be a moment of joy, of anticipation. But something ominous in the air made Fuda's stomach twist with unease. Then Fortuna spoke. His voice cut through Fuda's thoughts like a blade. He didn't offer hope or reassurance. Instead, he revealed what he called a truth, a prophecy he had seen, one that could not be altered. The child would not survive. Fuda's mother would die as well. The words settled over Fuda, stealing the breath from his lungs. Fortuna did not see this as a tragedy. To him, it was a part of the grand design, a reality woven into the fabric of fate. He had never believed in free will, only in the certainty of what would come. Fuda refused to accept it. His heart pounded, his mind racing for ways to prove Fortuna wrong. But Fortuna had more to say. This was not just about Fuda's family. Fortuna had a plan, a vision that extended far beyond personal loss. He intended to push Fuda into despair, to break him so that he would fall in battle against Kuko. Fortuna would claim Kuko's spirit circle as a power source by doing so. With power, he would challenge Pacifica, the planetary spirit itself. His goal was nothing less than consuming the universe, bending existence to his will. The sheer scope of it was staggering. Fortuna spoke with the certainty of a god, as if this was the only path that mattered. To him, Fuda was a mere vessel, a means to an end. But Fuda wasn't ready to surrender. His hands clenched into fists, his voice trembling with fury. "Life isn't meaningless," he said. "It doesn't need to be part of something greater to have worth." Fortuna scoffed. To him, Fuda's words were the ramblings of a boy who refused to see the bigger picture. What was the point of existence if not to rise beyond limitations? Why settle for a fleeting, insignificant life when power was within reach? Fortuna saw Fuda's refusal as cowardice, an unwillingness to embrace his potential. "You waste everything we could be," Fortuna spat. "You choose weakness. You choose to live like an ordinary, forgettable human." But Fuda didn't see it that way. To him, being human, being ordinary, wasn't a weakness. It was the very thing that made life worth living. He wasn't interested in controlling the universe. He wanted to protect what little he had, hold on to the people he loved, and find happiness in the simplest of moments. That, to him, was enough. The tension between them thickened, the weight of their differences growing heavier. Fortuna was angry. Fuda was determined. Neither was willing to yield. And in that moment, the future had never felt so uncertain. Fortuna had prided himself on his mind and his ability to outmaneuver any opponent with intellect and experience. But as he took control of Fuda's body, he quickly realized that knowledge alone wasn't enough. This body was nothing like the battle-hardened forms he had inhabited before. His movements felt sluggish, his strikes lacked weight, and his endurance drained too quickly. For all his skill, he was trapped in the shell of a boy, and it was infuriating. Before he could adjust, Ys stepped forward. The spirit had been an enigma, watching Kuko with an unreadable expression. He turned to Fortuna, questioning and pushing him to justify his actions. Why did he cling to the past? What did he hope to gain? At first, Fortuna dismissed him, unwilling to engage in what he saw as a pointless conversation. Then Fuda spoke, though distant, still present in his mind. Fuda didn't attack with fists or weapons. Instead, he attacked with words, challenging everything Fortuna stood for. He accused him of being blinded by old wounds and letting bitterness dictate his choices. He argued another way, to break the cycle if Fortuna let go. But Fortuna refused such naive optimism. The world wasn't kind, and history had proven that repeatedly. He couldn't afford to believe in something as fragile as peace. Then came Kuko, always a force. When the battle began, Fortuna realized his trouble. His mind knew every move, every counter, but his body couldn't keep up. Kuko was relentless, her strikes fueled by conviction. Every blow was a testament to her burdens and the choices she made to bring them to this moment. But as they fought, something stirred in Fuda's consciousness. His past selves, each a different version of him, began to awaken. One by one, they spoke, offering insights, regrets, and hopes. They weren't just memories. They were pieces of him, remnants of lives that had led to this moment. And now, instead of fighting alone, Fuda had an entire history beside him. Fortuna, for all his arrogance, felt it, too. The weight of lifetimes pressed against him, whispering truths he didn't want to hear. His certainty wavered, but he forced himself to push forward. He couldn't afford doubt now. Then, amid battle, a phone rang. The sound cut through the chaos, stopping Fortuna in his tracks. Confused, he hesitated before answering. On the other end was Fuda's father, his voice carrying news that shattered everything Fortuna thought he knew. The twins had been born. Alive. Fortuna had believed his prophecy was absolute, that Fuda's mother would not survive and that the birth would end in tragedy. But reality had defied him. The twins were here and the mother was safe. It was impossible. Fuda didn't hesitate. He seized the moment, throwing Fortuna's own words back at him. If even fate could change, then what else was possible? Wasn't this proof that the past didn't have to dictate the future? No matter how much pain had been endured, could new beginnings exist? Fortuna stood frozen. The certainty he had built his existence around was crumbling. The chapter ended not with victory but with uncertainty. For Fuda, the birth of the twins was hope, a reminder that destiny wasn't set in stone. For Fortuna, it was a terrifying realization that perhaps he had been wrong for the first time. Fuda could feel himself slipping. The weight of his past lives bore down on him, pressing against his sense of self. The memories weren't just resurfacing. They were threatening to consume him entirely. And at the center of it all was Fortuna, the incarnation of his most ruthless, unforgivable self. The one whose sins still echoed across lifetimes. As Fortuna's presence grew stronger, the lines between past and present blurred. It wasn't just a mental battle anymore. It was as if time had collapsed, trapping Fuda in a space where all his incarnations existed. He drowned in them, losing himself to the tide of faces and voices that once belonged to him. And then Kuko appeared. She had always been a constant in his journey, sometimes his enemy, sometimes something more complicated. As he teetered on the edge, she stepped forward, wielding the spirit circle. That ring of flame was no ordinary weapon. It held the power to control reincarnation, to make him remember, to force him to face everything he had done across lifetimes. But Fortuna was faster. In a split second, he reached out and seized her arm. A touch was all it took. The spirit circle, the tool meant to keep him in check, was now in his hands. The balance shifted. What was already a losing battle for Fuda suddenly became far more dangerous. As the power of the spirit circle slipped away from Kuko, Fuda felt something even worse, his presence and identity beginning to dissolve. He wasn't just losing control. He was disappearing. His body, soul, and existence wavered like a flame in the wind. Then, through the chaos came a familiar voice. Rune. And another, East. They had been allies with him for so long in a fight that spanned centuries. Now, they reached for him, trying to pull him back before it was too late. Their presence was a lifeline, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this battle. And for a moment, something shifted. The storm of past lives stilled, just barely, as if their combined efforts had created a crack in Fortuna's overwhelming force. It was just enough. With the last of his strength, Fuda summoned the Soul Catcher. The device had always been an enigma, something beyond simple magic that felt almost alien, but now it was his only chance. As he grasped it, the power it held surged through him. It latched onto Fortuna, wrapping around that dark, consuming force and holding it back. The struggle wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Fuda had a moment to breathe, a moment to fight back. He wasn't free. Not yet. Kuko's spirit circle was still gone. Fortuna was still there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to break free. And Fuda himself, battered, exhausted, barely holding on, knew that the battle wasn't just about defeating Fortuna. It was about finding himself again, piecing together the fragments of his identity before there was nothing left. As the dust settled, he stood at the edge of something uncertain. Hope, fear, regret, all of it tangled together, leading toward the next inevitable confrontation. Fuda felt it creeping in, the force of his past lives threatening to consume him. Among them, Fortuna loomed large and dangerous. His sins haunted him, the ruthless actions of a former self leaving scars he could never erase. Fortuna seemed ready to take over in his moment of weakness, pulling him back into the cycle of destruction he had fought hard to escape. But as the weight of Fortuna's presence became unbearable, something stirred within him. The others, Fawn, Van, Floors, Hautaru, Lafal, Fuko, all the lives he had lived stepped forward from the depths of his soul. They did not come to fight or drag him into the past. Instead, they gathered around him, lending strength, wisdom, and resolve. They reminded him that his story was not just one of mistakes and violence but also of change. With their support, Fuda found his footing. He pushed back against the chaos threatening to swallow him and reclaimed himself. He would not be a prisoner of the past. Standing firm, he made a plea not to the gods but to Spacifica. He called upon it, asking for a favor unlike any before. The spirit circles, ancient and powerful, had been at the heart of everything: magic, reincarnation, the endless cycle of intertwined lives. Fuda sought to release them, entrusting them to Spacifica and reshaping fate. His wish was clear: he wanted Rune and East to be reborn. Not as lingering spirits, but as human beings. Spacifica did not answer immediately. It did not grant wishes without consequence. Instead, it turned to Rune, asking for her will. Would she accept this fate? Would she embrace the uncertain future of a human life? Rune, mysterious and ethereal, did not hesitate. She agreed, but with one condition. If she and East were to be reborn, it would not be as separate individuals. They would not return as strangers scattered by destiny. They would come back as one, more connected than before. Rune made her request clear. They would be reborn as the children of Fuda and Kuko. The weight of her words settled over Fuda like stillness after a storm. It was not just a condition, it shifted everything he had known. Rebirth was not just about setting spirits free but about creating something new. The past would not simply dissolve. It would take root in a future where the line between supernatural and human blurred intimately. There was no turning back. With a deep breath, Fuda placed the spirit circles into Spacifica's hands. The moment they left his grasp, the world shuddered. Then, East and Rune were gone. Not in a violent flash or departure, they faded, dissolving into the unseen forces governing existence. It was over. The cycle had broken. Yet even in victory, loss clung to the moment. Kuko's reaction was immediate. Tears slipped down her face, not just from sadness but from an ache stretching across lifetimes. This was an ending she had not expected. Renewal had come but at a cost. Fuda, too, felt the weight. He had freed himself from his ghosts. Yet, as he stood there with silent tears, he realized that breaking free did not mean escaping pain. It only meant carrying it differently now. The past was gone. The future had been rewritten, but the scars would take time to heal. Fuda woke with a start, his mind entangled in the remnants of a vision, one carrying the weight of countless lives. Faces flickered in his memory, a noble knight who fought for honor, a tormented soul lost to despair, and the ruthless shadow of Fortuna, a man who wielded power without mercy. Every choice he had made across lifetimes had led to this moment. He had lived, suffered, triumphed, but always with the burden of sins, regrets, and unfinished stories. Even now, echoes of those lives clung to him, whispering of fate, memory, and the chance, however small, to finally break free. As the vision faded, Fuda found himself face to face with Kuko Ishigami. She had entered his life like a storm, a transfer student who had declared him her enemy upon arrival. Her hatred was fueled by ancient wounds neither had asked to inherit. But now, something between them had changed. The air was still heavy with history, yet it no longer crackled with the same lethal intensity. Kuko's gaze held him in place, searching, weighing the past against the present. The fierce determination that had once driven her revenge remained, but it had softened, tempered by something neither of them had quite named yet. Their words were few, but understanding grew in the silence between them. Then, as if pulled by a force beyond themselves, they stepped forward together. Their hands met in a handshake, not just a greeting, but something greater. In that single moment, every lifetime they had lived, every battle fought and lost, every wound inflicted, was acknowledged and laid to rest. The past selves that had haunted them, Fuda's many incarnations, Kuko's pain, stood witness to this quiet truce. With each second, old grudges peeled away, layer by layer, like the shedding of ancient skin. Fuda had spent lifetimes in a cycle of conflict, destined to repeat the same patterns. But now, in this moment, there was a choice, a possibility. The past did not have to dictate the future. And then, Kuko moved. Before Fuda could react, she closed the space between them and pressed her lips against his. It was not a kiss of simple romance nor mere impulse. It was something deeper that reached into the very foundation of who they were and rewrote it. A moment of release, of forgiveness, a silent vow that the past would no longer control them. For so long, Kuko had clung to the bitterness of lives long gone, and Fuda had carried the burden of guilt spanning centuries. But in that single touch, they let go, not just of their grievances but of the weight they had placed upon themselves. When they pulled apart, the world felt quieter, lighter. Fuda exhaled, his shoulders easing from a tension he hadn't realized he still held. His expression was not one of triumph nor disbelief, it was something simpler. Acceptance. The ghosts of his former selves no longer pressed in so close. The endless cycle that had dictated his existence was fading into the background, no longer the force that defined him. Yet, even as the past receded, the future remained uncertain. Would the world truly change now that the chains of reincarnation were loosening? What would become of those who have lived within this cycle for just as long? Rune, East, and others whose fates were still unwritten. For now, Fuda did not know the answers, but he was willing to find out for the first time in lifetimes. Kuko Ishigami stood alone, her thoughts heavy with the weight of a lifetime spent chasing the echoes of Fuda's countless incarnations. It was a strange kind of grief that carried both sorrow and relief, as if she had finally reached the end of a long and winding road. For so long, she had been caught in the cycle, trapped between past and present, but now, for the first time, there was stillness. An end had come, but in that ending, something new waited just beyond the horizon. As she lingered in her solitude, a presence approached, calm, steady, and unexpected. It was Koko, a figure who arrived without fanfare, his very being radiating quiet understanding. Their meeting was initially unspoken, gazes locking across the space between them. There was something familiar in that moment, something unshaped by words. The past lingered in the air, unspoken but not forgotten. For a while, neither spoke. There was no need to. The silence between them carried a depth that words could not touch, a recognition that their meeting was not mere coincidence. When the conversation finally began, it unfolded with a slow, deliberate rhythm, each sentence measured and thoughtful. Kuko, still tethered to the past, reflected on the nature of life itself, its impermanence, its endless cycles. She spoke of memories that refused to fade, of wounds that had long since closed but still ached when touched. But she also spoke of change. No matter how deeply ingrained, the past did not have to define the future. Her words were not spoken in certainty but in quiet acceptance. And Koko listened. His presence was not imposing, nor did he try to fix what was already healing. Instead, he was simply there, a reminder that even in the aftermath of something profound, there was still room to move forward. They walked together, their path winding through a landscape that felt real and unreal, familiar yet distant. The world around them shifted, moments of the past flickering in and out of view, a smile shared, a battle fought, a promise made and broken. These were the remnants of Kuko and Fuda's lives, moments that had shaped them but no longer held them captive. The light softened as they moved forward, the boundaries between memory and possibility blurring with every step. There was no grand conclusion waiting for them at the journey's end. No finality, no absolute answers. Only the quiet reassurance that life continued and the cycle did not stop simply because one chapter had closed. Kuko and Koko walked side by side, and something new was taking shape in the space between them. Fuda's story ended, but the world did not stop turning. Love, loss, and renewal would continue, each life flowing into the next like a river meeting the sea. Kuko did not know what lay ahead, but she was willing to find out for the first time in a long time. And so, they walked on with the past behind them and the future stretching wide before them.